The word window, the one you use every day, for the glass in your bedroom wall, for the small icon on your phone, first arrived in English from the Old Norse word vindaga, wind-eye, and it was not glass at all. It was a small hole cut through the thatch of a roof, open to let the smoke out, and one cold star in. The Vikings carried the word to England in their longships. English kept the sound, and slowly forgot the rest. You have been saying it ever since, without knowing, a quiet place to fall asleep, and to wake up in the morning, knowing one small thing you didn't know the night before. Now soften where you are. Let your shoulders drop a little further. Let the weight of you settle into the mattress, slow and small. Breathe out the day. Let the small things go one by one. There is nothing left to hold for now. Tonight you stay inside one wooden house in a small city the Vikings called Jorvik, old York, perhaps 1,000 winters ago. One household, one single hearth. 3 long, quiet hours, from dusk to the cold hour before dawn. Outside, blue snow on the wooden boardwalks. Inside, a small, slow fire that orders everything in the room. Step outside the door for a moment before going in. Stand on the threshold. The street is empty. The snow has stopped falling, though the air still holds the small dryness that snow leaves behind. Underfoot, the white is packed and dry, almost crisp. It squeaks softly with each step. This street has a name. The people who walk it call it Coppergate, and they call it that because for as long as anyone in this town remembers, this lane has been the lane of the cup makers. The word itself is half Old Norse. The first half, kop, means cup. The second half, gata, means street, street of the cup makers. 1,000 years from now, when archaeologists lift the wet black soil out of this very ground, they will find the small wooden cores of half-turned cups by the thousand. The lathes are quiet tonight, packed away under leather. They are simple pole lathes, no taller than a man, worked by foot, and they turn a soft block of ash or maple into a clean, shallow bowl in the time it takes a kettle to warm. The shavings curl off in long, pale ribbons. The names of the men who worked these lathes are long lost, but the name of their street remembers them faithfully every time it is spoken. Coppergate, street of the cup makers, a word that has outlived its workshops by 1,000 years. The town itself has a name too, and the name has a small, strange history. A long time before tonight, when Roman soldiers still kept the walls in good repair, the place was called Eboricum. That is a Celtic word, older than the Romans, and its meaning is uncertain. It may have meant something about yew trees, or a man whose name has been lost. When the Romans left and the Anglo-Saxons came, they heard Eboricum in their own ears and made it into a word that felt like their own. They turned it into Ewa for week. Ewa for, in their tongue, meant a wild boar. Wick meant a settlement. To them the town became the settlement of the wild boar, though there is no reason to think any boar was ever truly the cause. Then, perhaps 100 years ago by the count of this winter, the Vikings came over the sea and took the town and renamed it again. They heard Eofurwick, and they made it into Jórvík. Shore in Old Norse was a short form of Jofr, and Jofr again meant a wild boar. Vik meant a bay or an inlet. To the Norse, the town became the Wild Boar Bay. Two empires had passed through. Each had reached for the same animal. The same syllable kept being misheard, and kept settling on the same creature in the listener's mind. The town has been Iboracum, Eofolwick, and Jorvik, and somehow, beneath all three names, a small unspoken wild boar has been quietly waiting. Stand for another moment. Let your eyes adjust. There is no street lighting here, none at all. No lantern on a post, no glow at the corner, no gentle wash of orange over the gable end of the next house. The dark in Jórvík is the dark of a forest. It is complete and old. The only light is the moon when there is one, the small carried glow of a horn lantern when someone passes, and the warm seep of fire from under a door. That dark is hard to picture, perhaps, for a modern ear. Picture a country lane at midnight with no farmhouse and no car. Then take away the moon. Then take away the distant glow of any town on the horizon. Then take away the small red light on the smoke alarm, the soft blue of a charger on a bedside table, the pale spill from a street lamp 2 roads over. Take away every small electric thing that quietly insists, even at midnight, that the world is still on. What is left is the dark of this street. The eyes do not strain against it. They simply rest in it, the way the eyes rest in a deep room. After a few moments, the dark begins to give back small gifts of its own. The outline of a gable against a slightly less dark sky, the breath of one's own breath, pale for an instant before it joins the air. The faint amber seam under a far door. Look down. Underfoot, the white snow is not packed onto bare mud. It is packed onto raised boards. Long planks of oak and ash, laid across short cross pieces of woven hazel, sit a hand's breadth above the wet ground below. The boards run the length of the lane. They have been there long enough that the wood is dark and worn smooth by feet. The grain on each plank has lifted slightly with the wet years, the way old jetty wood lifts, and the snow has settled into those fine lines. 1,000 years from now, people will lift these very boards out of the waterlogged soil and stand looking at them in a quiet museum, marveling that wood can wait so long under the earth and still be wood. They will set the planks behind glass. They will tilt small lamps onto them. They will read papers about them at conferences in warm rooms. Tonight, the boards only do their quiet small work. They keep the feet of the city out of the mud. They take the weight of the milk pail at dawn, the bare foot of the child running out for a moment to look at the snow, the slow tread of an old neighbor going home. Move now to your left, just 2 slow steps, and look down the length of the lane. There are perhaps 100 wooden houses along this stretch alone. Beyond them, more houses and more lanes leading off, and beyond those the timber palisade and the line of the old Roman wall. Inside this small town, on a night like this one, there are perhaps 10,000 souls. 10,000. That is a number it is easy to say and hard to feel. It means 100 hearths going at once on this one street. It means 1,000 more on the next streets. It means a town that is in this moment the second busiest place in all of England, second only to London, far to the south. It is small by the measure of the world, far to the south and east, across the sea and across the slow turning of a continent. The city of Constantinople burns its endless lamps along the walls of the Golden Horn. The dome of the great church there glows by candlelight late into the night. Further south still, in the bright dry air of Cordoba in Spain, scholars are awake in courtyard libraries, reading Greek and Arabic by the same yellow light, copying out texts that the rest of Europe has half forgotten. By their measure, Jórvík is a quiet northern town in a cold country. By their measure, this street is the edge of a known world, but by the measure of this island, on this winter night, this street is the second loudest place there is. And on a night like this, even the loud places are quiet. Even the second busiest town in England keeps its voice low, and pulls its shutters in, and lets its smoke rise slow, a breath in, a breath out. The cold is honest. It does not push or hurt. It simply rests on the skin. Above the houses, look up at the roof lines. From the smoke hole of every house, a soft pale column rises into the dark. The columns are slow. They are not the busy plumes of a workshop fire. They are the patient drift of a banked evening hearth, of a pot half warm on its hooks, of a household settling towards supper. The columns lean a little eastward together, the way slow smoke does when the wind has just laid itself down. 100 quiet chimneys, except none of them are chimneys. They are only holes in the thatch. The smoke takes its own time finding them. The river is not far. You cannot see it from here, but you can feel where it is, the way one can always feel where a large, slow river is, even with the eyes closed. 2 streets over, the river Ouse runs broad and slow, and tonight, as on many winter nights, its surface is frozen. The cold has held long enough for the ice to thicken into something a small body can stand on. Children in this town will scratch out simple skates from bone and run on that ice tomorrow morning. The skates will be tied to the soles of their shoes with strips of leather. Tonight the river is only a long, quiet ribbon under a thin white coat. It does not hurry. It has not hurried in any season. The river has been here longer than any name the town has been given, and will be here, still slow, long after every name is changed again. Around you the street keeps its small sounds. There is the muffled creak of a shutter on a neighbor's house. A dog, far off, lifts its voice once and lets it fall. Somewhere a wooden door opens and closes very softly, as if the person opening it did not want to disturb the snow. A baby cries for half a breath behind 2 walls and is hushed before the cry can finish itself. These are the sounds of a town turning towards sleep. Look once at the house directly in front of you. It is not a large house. It is no taller than any of its neighbors. The walls are post and wattle, oak posts at the corners, woven willow panels between, daub of clay and straw smoothed over the willow. The roof is thatched with river reed and held down by long laths of hazel. The door is low and made of 3 planks pegged with oak. There is no glass anywhere in the wall, of course. There is only the door, the low timber, the daub, the thatch, the thin pale rise of smoke from the hole at the ridge. A faint glow shows around the edge of the door. It is the amber color of a fire that has been kept going for some hours. The light is not bright. It is the kind of light that is felt before it is seen. Behind that door there will be a room. Not a large room, perhaps 7 paces long and 4 across. A central long hearth running down the middle of the packed earth floor, fed slowly with seasoned oak and a little peat. A small soapstone lamp burning fish oil in one corner. A yellow tongue no taller than a thumb. A woman, perhaps, kneeling at a hand quern, finishing the last grain for the morning. A child asleep already in the box bed against the back wall. A grey cat curled into the bend of the child's knees. A dog at the threshold, ears moving even in sleep. You do not know these people. You will not learn their names. They are not famous, and no saga will be written about them. They are simply a Viking age household in the town once called Eberacum, then Eoforik, then Jórvík, on an ordinary deep winter night in the 10th century after Christ. The room is warm. The fire is small but well fed. The work of the day is almost done. There is bread in the basket and dried fish softening over the pot. There is no danger here tonight. There is only the long quiet hour before sleep. Take one last look at the street behind you. The packed snow on the boardwalks, the dark gable ends of the neighbors' houses, the pale columns of smoke rising slow and even, the long line of the lane disappearing into the deeper dark beyond. Hold the picture for a moment. This is Coppergate. This is Jorvik. This is the town that 2 empires named after the same wild boar by accident, and that 10,000 souls now call home on a winter night 1,000 years ago. Turn back to the house. Lift your hand to the door. The wood is cold to the touch, but only on its outside. The inside of the wood, the side that has been close to the fire for hours, is faintly warm. The door gives a little under your hand, the way a well-used door gives. The amber light around its edge grows a little brighter as the door begins to move, and behind one such door, the warmth was already waiting. Step inside now, and let the door close behind you. The cold withdraws to the other side of the wood. The latch settles. For a moment the room is only outlines and warm air, and the slow ember-red breathing at its center. Stand on the threshold for that moment. Take in the shape of the room without naming the things in it. There is no rush. The house has been waiting all evening, and it will still be waiting in a minute, in 2. Your eyes adjust by the second. The floor is packed earth, dark and smooth, dusted across with a fine grey ash. The walls are woven willow, thick as a forearm, plastered over with clay and straw and a little dung, all of it long, dry and warm to the touch. The wood you can still see here and there at the corners and at the door frame is oak, heavy, dark, set deep into the ground in 4 corner posts that hold the whole roof up. Between those posts, the willow has been woven in the way a basket is woven, only larger, room-sized. Onto the willow the daub was pressed by hand, a winter's worth of small flat palms, smoothing it into the weave until the walls were warm and tight, and just rough enough to hold a coat of soot. The whole house was built without a single nail, wood pegs at the joints, lashings of willow withered the rafters. A craft older than the city and quieter than it. The roof is thatch, reed and rye straw laid thick over a frame of slender poles, blackened on its underside by years of slow smoke. The whole space is small, perhaps 7 paces long, perhaps 4.5 wide. A single low room with a roof that slopes from the center out to the eaves on either side, and yet standing inside it, the smallness is not a lack, it is the shape of warmth. A larger room would lose its heat to corners. This room does not have corners enough to lose anything in. Above you, the rafters fade into a dark that is not quite black. A pale column of smoke is moving up through them, slow as a thought, toward a single hole cut in the center of the roof. That hole, the only opening to the night, has a name. 2 names actually, for the people of this town speak 2 tongues. In Old Norse it is Jórvík, in the older tongue, the one the Vikings have been folding into their own these last 100 years, it has begun to be called Vindöga, the wind eye. The wind eye is the same word, the same hole, that your own language carries forward as window. 1,000 years from now the word will mean glass in a wall. Tonight it means a small ragged square of sky, and one cold star resting in it. At the center of the room, set into the floor, is a long shallow trench lined with river stones. This is the hearth, not a fireplace at the side of the room, not a stove, a long low fire laid in the very middle of the floor, the way fires have been laid in northern houses since long before anyone thought to write the word house down. The stones around it are the size of a fist, river-rounded, blackened on their inner faces and pale grey on their outer ones, picked no doubt by a younger hand from the bank of the Ouse one summer, and carried back in a basket to be set in this slow ring. The fire is low now. It has been fed all day, and it will be fed for an hour more before being banked. 3 lengths of birch lie across the stones, burning quietly, white-edged, almost without flame, just a slow, even glow that warms the stones and the air and the rafters and the people in the room without trouble. The stones along the edge are hot. You could not lay a hand on them. A blackened iron pot sits to one side, its bottom dark with use. Beside it, a wooden bowl of barley waits. Here is the small fact: a modern person walking into this room for the first time would miss. The fire is not pushed to an edge. There is no chimney. There is no fireplace built into a wall. In the long centuries before the chimney was invented, the fire was not a thing the room contained. The fire was the center, and the room arranged itself around it. The benches faced it, the beds aligned with it. The cooking happened at its lip, the drying of cloth, the warming of cold feet, the long evening of talk, all of it gathered to this single quiet trench of stones. The fire was not an appliance. The fire was the room. That is why no one sits with their back to it. That is why the door, when it opened toward it. That is why the smoke hole sits directly above it, a small ragged window straight up into the night. Heat and smoke rose in a slow column from the center of the floor to the center of the ceiling, and the room around that column was warm and dark and lived in. It is also why in such a house the words for hearth and home slid easily into each other over the long centuries. To go home was to go to the fire. To leave home was to step away from it. There was no other heat to step toward. Notice now the air, it does not sting. The smoke that lifts from the birch is thin and dry, and almost all of it finds the hole and is gone. A little hangs at the rafters, a soft blue layer just above head height, slow moving, almost still. Lower down where the people of the house live, the air is clear and warm and smells of resin and ash and dry wool. Centuries from now, archaeologists studying the lungs of skeletons from such houses will note the marks of a lifetime breathing this air. Tonight, in this hour, it is only the warm, soft smell of a fire that has been kept well. Look down. The floor at your feet is dusted with ash, raked thin and even from the hearth outward. Each evening someone takes a long birch twig broom and pours a fresh layer across the packed earth. The ash is not laziness, it is intention. The ash absorbs moisture from boots and from the breath of animals at the threshold. It soaks up small spills, it carries odor away, and it softens, almost completely, the sound of a footstep. Walk in this room and you hear no footfall, only the small give of fine grey powder under leather. The whole floor whispers. Every step in this house is quieter than the step before. It would have been on bare wood. A house in which no one needs to tell anyone else to be quiet. Cross now to the bench along the eastern wall. The wood is worn smooth in a long oval where backs and elbows have rested for years. Sit. Let your weight settle into it. The bench is low. The hearth is at the height of your knees. The fire glow reaches your hands without effort. From here you can see the rest of the room. The bed shelf along the north wall built into the framing, piled with straw and a heavy fur. A loom leaning, unattended, against the back wall. A row of wooden pegs by the door, hung with 2 cloaks, a leather satchel, a small iron charm on a thong, a wooden cross beside it, a spindle in a basket on the floor, a wooden cup on the table, a grey cat asleep on a folded cloak, a dog curled at the threshold, one ear half raised. The whole life of the household, gathered in less than 30 square paces, around a low trench of slow stones. On a small ledge cut into one of the oak posts sits a soapstone lamp. It is no larger than a cupped palm. The stone is pale grey, worn dark around its lip from 1,000 evenings of handling. In its shallow bowl is a finger of pale fish oil and a small wick of twisted linen, and on the wick is one yellow tongue of flame, one, just one. It does not flicker, it does not gutter, it burns as quietly as a held breath. Soapstone, slow to heat and slow to cool, keeps its warmth long after the flame is out, so that the lamp itself becomes a small warm stone in the palm of whoever last carried it. Fish oil burns slow and dim, sometimes seal fat, in years when a trader from the far north has come down the river with skins to sell. The whole light such a lamp gives off, across an hour, would not reach the page of a book on the far wall, but it does not need to. It only needs to keep one small circle of yellow on the post beside the bed, so that a hand reaching for a blanket in the dark can find it. Try to imagine the dark of this room without the lamp, without the hearth, without the smoke hole above. There is no street light outside. There is no glow of a city across the river. The dark, in 10th century Jorvik, is the dark of a forest at the bottom of winter, complete and old. The lamp is not decoration. The lamp is a small, deliberate refusal of that dark. One tongue of yellow, one palm-sized stone of warmth. That is the entire light of the evening, and it is enough. And so, sitting on the bench, you begin to understand the room. The walls are warm because the daub holds heat. The floor is soft because the ash is fresh. The air is clear because the smoke hole was cut where the smoke wants to go. The light is small because more light is not needed. The fire is in the middle because the middle is where a fire belongs. There is no architect's plan behind any of this. There is only 1,000 winters of trying, 1,000 winters of watching where the smoke went, and where the cold came in, and which corner stayed driest, and which post took the weight best. 1,000 winters of small adjustments by people whose names no one will ever know. The room you are sitting in is the slow accumulated answer to a single quiet question. How do you keep warm through a long northern night without losing the air to the smoke? The answer is this trench of stones, this hole in the roof, this floor of ash, this lamp the size of a cupped palm. The answer took centuries to find. It will hold for centuries more. Somewhere across the room a piece of birch settles in the hearth, sending up a small soft sigh of sparks. The cat lifts an ear, then lowers it. The dog at the threshold does not stir. From the eaves comes the faint, irregular tick of cooling thatch as the temperature inside the house climbs another half-degree above the cold of the street. The hearthstones glow a little brighter as the new layer of birch takes. The yellow tongue of the lamp leans, almost imperceptibly, then steadies. The air at the rafters thickens to a slow grey blue. A pale column of smoke moves up through it, finds the wind-eye, and is gone into the dark above the city. The single cold star at the edge of the wind-eye holds its place above the smoke, small and white and steady, as it has held its place all evening. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, the room holds its small warm shape against it. Sit a while. There is nothing yet to do. The supper has not been started. The day work is finished. The animals in the yard are settled. The household has gathered, almost without speaking, to this slow circle of stones at the center of the floor, and the room around them is doing the only thing it has ever known how to do, keep them warm through the night. The fire glows. The wind-eye opens onto a single cold star. The lamp burns its one small yellow tongue. The ash on the floor softens every step, and the room, full now of warmth, settled into the slow shape of an evening. Around the hearth, the voices have already begun. Low, unhurried, threaded through the small noises of the room. A cup tapped softly on a board, a child's question answered without urgency, the dog at the threshold breathing in his sleep. The fire, fed for the evening, holds its small, slow shape at the center of everything, and the room turns gently around it. Listen for a moment before settling in. The talk in this house tonight is not in one language. It is in two, braided together so tightly that no one in the room can quite tell them apart anymore. Half of what is said is Old English, half is Old Norse. The seam between them has begun to disappear, the way a seam in a worn shirt disappears under enough wearing. A man asks, in his own quiet way, for the knife. Knife is a Norse word. The bowl of egg he is reaching past. Egg is Norse too. The sky outside the smoke hole. The wind eye where one star looks down through the rising warmth. Both of those words, knife and sky, came across the North Sea inside ships. They settled into the mouths of the people here, and they stayed. His wife answers him. She uses the word husband. That is Norse too. Husbandi, master of the house. A leg moved under the bench. A patch of skin on a child's elbow showing through a tear in a sleeve. A sister speaking from the corner. Get me the cup. Give me the salt. Take this. All of them, every one of them, are words the Vikings carried in with their long ships and quietly left behind in the bedrooms and kitchens of England. The listener, lying in a different room, in a different century, would use perhaps 10 of them before breakfast tomorrow without ever knowing. Knife to butter the bread, egg in the pan, sky outside the curtain, husband on the other pillow, skin against the cool linen. Each of these small everyday words, a soft echo of a Viking ship and a Yorkshire hearth. The hearth pops. The talk goes on. There was a time when this was strange, when the people of York would have heard a Norse trader come up the boardwalks of Coppergate and not quite understood him, and a Norse trader would have heard a Yorkshire farmer and not quite understood her either, but the two languages were close. Both came from the same old Germanic root, separated by only a few centuries of drift. They shared the bones. The endings were different. The small vowels had moved, but the bones were the same, so the speakers compromised. They met in the middle. They dropped the endings that did not match. They kept the words that did. They simplified where they could and pointed where they could not. Within a generation, the children growing up around hearths like this one were speaking a third thing, not Norse, not English, but a softened mixture of both. They were the first people in the world to speak something close to what the listener now thinks of as English. It happened here, in rooms exactly like this one, around hearths exactly like this one, by the slow nightly act of people trying to be understood at supper. The grandmother is the oldest voice in the house tonight. She is past 50, which here is old. She came from a Norse-speaking family. Her own grandfather rode in from Jutland a long time ago, and she still uses Norse words for the things that mattered to her as a child. When she speaks to the smallest child, the one half asleep against her thigh, she calls herself Amma, grandmother in Norse. The child's other grandfather, sitting on the bench opposite, smiles at it. He is from an English-speaking family that has lived 3 streets over for 4 generations. The child calls him Elfadder, grandfather in Old English. The child has 2 languages and does not know it. The child has two grandparents and one of each. To the child, Amma and Elfada are just their names, the way the names of trees are just the names of trees. The walls between the two tongues, already so thin in this room, will be thinner still in the next generation, and thinner again in the one after that. By the time the great-grandchildren of this child are old, no one will know which words came from where. They will all just be words. A small thing happens here, around this hearth, that the listener uses every day. When the man across the room says they, when he speaks of the neighbors, of the people on the other side of the water wall, of the men who came back from the river before dark, he is using a Norse word, they, them, their. All three of them came from Old Norse, there, them, thera, and pushed the Old English words for the same idea, here, him, hera, out of the language entirely. Think about that for a small moment. The pronoun a modern English speaker uses for the people on their own street, for the strangers in their own town, for any group of human beings in the world, that pronoun is a Viking word. It came into English in rooms like this one. It came into English because two languages met around a hearth in places like Jorvik and made a quiet compromise. The English words for they and them lost, the Norse words won, and no one alive today in any English-speaking country can finish a single conversation without using them. Think of the last sentence the listener spoke aloud today. Almost certainly it contained a they, or a them, or a their. The shape of it sat in the mouth so naturally that no thought was given to it. And yet, 1,000 years ago, that same small word traveled here from a different country, on a different ship, in a different mouth. This is the strangest part of language. The largest changes are usually invisible. The ones you feel in your chest are the small ones. A new slang word, a borrowed phrase from a film, a piece of office vocabulary that drifts in for a season and then drifts out. The ones that go deepest are the ones you never notice, because they are already inside the way you think. They are the pronouns. They are the verbs you do not question. They are the small grammatical pieces that hold everything else up. Around the hearth tonight, no one knows any of this. No one has a name for it. They are simply speaking. The two languages are running like two streams that have begun to share a bed, and the speakers are walking down the middle of the new stream without looking back at where the water came from. Old English used to be a language full of endings. A noun would change its shape depending on whether it was the doer or the done to, whether it was singular or plural, whether it was a tool, a place, or a possession. A verb would change depending on who was doing it. The endings carried the meaning. The word order could be loose. A sentence could be folded and refolded around itself, and the small tails on each word would tell the listener how the pieces fit. But around hearths like this, with two close languages tripping over each other's endings, the endings began to fall away. People used the parts that both languages shared, and let the parts that did not match drop into silence. Word order began to do more of the work. The little tails wore down, the way a doorstep wears down under enough feet. By the time another 2 centuries had passed, English had become an analytic language, a language that depends on the order of its words to make sense, rather than on small grammar tails inside them. Modern English's grammar, That strange flat clear thing the listener uses without thinking was in part made here, made in this kind of room, around this kind of fire, by people who were just trying to be understood by a half-cousin from Lincoln or a trader from Trondheim. They were not reforming a language, they were getting through dinner. The man across the hearth says something now, and his wife laughs. A short, low, surprised laugh. Both, she says, both. That is Norse too. Same as Norse. Ah, even that small everyday verb is closer to the Norse form than the Old English one. Want is Norse. The grandmother says something quiet, and the way she puts her sentence together is half from one country and half from another. None of them notice. None of them has a reason to. The smallest child stirs, then settles again. Half asleep, the child mumbles a word. The word is for water. No one in the room could say whether it is the Norse word or the English one. They are too close. The child himself does not know. He will speak both for the rest of his life, and his own children will speak only the mixture, and they will think it has always been one thing. Languages do not usually know they are being made. They only know sometimes that they have already changed. In a wooden box on a shelf, under a folded cloth, there is a small piece of bone, smooth, worn pale by handling. On it, someone has scratched a row of runes, just a name, an owner's mark. Asgeir Asgeir owns this. A line of runes for a comb, perhaps, or a knife handle, or a wooden spoon. Diggers will find scratchings like this all over Coppergate 1,000 years from now. Bones, wooden sticks, slate, even one piece of antler with a half-finished curse on it, from someone who was angry with someone else for a quiet moment a long time ago. These were not formal documents. They were the doodles of everyday people, the way a modern listener might scribble their own initials into the bark of a tree at a campsite, or on the back of a notebook in school. People in Jorvik did the same thing, but with runes on bone in 2 alphabets. They could read the Latin alphabet from the churches if they had any schooling. They could carve in runes from their grandfather's tradition. Most of them probably used whichever came first to hand. A father might sign his name in Latin letters on a wooden tag for the market, and his daughter might scratch a small rune on the underside of her loom weight to claim it as her own. Both were normal. Neither was thought of as foreign. 2 alphabets, 2 languages, 1 room. The hearth has settled into its low, steady glow now. The smaller child is asleep against the grandmother's side. The older one is still listening, eyes half open, watching the smoke spiral up through the wind-eye in the roof. The talk has slowed. A long pause. Someone clears their throat. A small dry log is placed on the embers. The flame finds it and grows quietly around it. The modern listener, lying in a modern bed in a modern country, speaks every day a softened ghost of what is being spoken in this room tonight. The shape of every English sentence, its quiet preference for short words, its dropped endings, its reliance on order, was bent into being around hearths like this. The very pronouns the listener uses to name other people in their life were carried here by men in wool tunics and women in striped aprons who never knew they were doing anything important. It is one of the things you do not have to notice for it to be true. The strongest currents in a language are the ones nobody fights against, because nobody knows they are there. The talking eases. The grandmother smooths the sleeping child's hair with a slow hand. The man on the far bench turns the iron pot a quarter turn on the hearthstones, settling it into the embers for the night. Someone places a wooden cup on the floor beside their seat and stretches. The voices, half Norse, half English, slow into the spaces between sentences. The small everyday miracle of the language being made keeps going just under the surface of the room without anyone calling attention to it. The hearth gives a small soft pop. The smoke rises. The wind-eye lets one cold star look in, and after the words, the work of the evening turned to the table. The cauldron hangs from a single iron chain above the hearth. It is black, heavy, older than anyone in the room. It came into this household perhaps 30 years ago, when the woman who owns it was still a girl with thin wrists and a long winter ahead of her. It will outlast her. It will likely outlast her daughter and her daughter's daughter, and a hand not yet imagined that will lift it from the ash of some other fire on some other quiet night. Iron, kept oiled and kept warm, does not give up easily. She tilts it now, a small swing on its chain, and a soft slop of broth turns inside. The fire underneath is low. The fire underneath has been low for hours. Nothing in this kitchen is hurried, because nothing in this kitchen needs to be. Supper has been thinking about itself since the afternoon. In the half-light of the smoke hole, the cauldron's belly is the darkest thing in the room. The rim catches the orange of the embers and turns it into a thin, slow ring. The chain creaks once, the way a single floorboard creaks in a house at night, a sound that means nothing, that everyone in the room has heard 1,000 times. To a stranger walking in from the snow, this would be only a pot. To the people who live here, it is something else. A pot like this is not a small thing to own. In this century, in this town, in a house this size, an iron cauldron is one of the quiet ways a family says it is well. Not loud wealthy, not silver and cloak wealthy, just steady, just warm, just past the line where supper is a question. Wealth here is counted in layers, like clothes on a cold morning. The first layer is cattle. A household with cattle has milk in spring, meat in autumn, a bull calf to trade, a future. The second layer is iron, the pot, the spit, the long-handled hook, the belt knives. Iron means someone, somewhere up the lane, sat all day in a hot shed with a hammer, and someone in this house had enough to give them in return. The third layer is silver, hack silver mostly, coins and arm rings and broken bits, weighed on small balance scales when something larger is bought. Above all of those, almost out of sight, sit the bronze things, a bronze bowl, a bronze ladle with a swan neck handle. Bronze does not rust the way iron does. Bronze keeps its dull warm shine for centuries. To own a bronze pot in Jórvík in this year is to be the sort of person whose name people know 2 streets away. This household is not that. This household is iron, and that is more than enough. The cauldron is the quiet announcement of it, hung where every visitor's eye will pass without quite knowing what it has seen. Around the hearth, the supper is being put together in pieces. The young woman of the house carries a small wooden bowl across the room and sets it on the low table beside the fire. Inside the bowl, 3 lengths of dried fish are softening in a little warm water. They have been in the bowl for an hour. They are starting to remember what they were. The fish came from very far north, from a string of islands off the coast of what later listeners will call Norway, the Lofoten, where the cod run thick in winter and the air is cold and dry and salt clean. There, on wooden frames called gel, the fish are hung in pairs by their tails through the dark months. The wind does the work. No fire, no smoke, no salt, just months of cold, dry air, pulling every drop of water out of the flesh until the fish is as hard as a piece of light wood and will keep for years. It is called screed. By the 8th century, the trade is already moving. The dried cod travels south in open ships, then in carts, then over the table of a household like this one, 1,000 sea miles from where the fish was caught. There is a small saying that hangs around the trade, half joke, half truth, that the cod outlives its catchers. The man who pulled this fish from the water is almost certainly dead. The wood of the frame it hung on is still standing somewhere on a windy bluff above the sea. The fish itself has waited in the dark and the cold for tonight. She lifts one piece between 2 fingers and tests it. The flesh peels apart in long, pale, ropey strands. She drops it back into the bowl. Another hour, maybe. The supper has time. On the other side of the hearth, a hand quern grinds. The sound is not loud. It is a low, dry scrape, stone moving on stone, a fistful of barley between them. The lower stone is set into a wooden cradle on the floor. The upper stone turns under one calm hand. Around the rim, the barley flour falls in small soft drifts, the color of dust at the edge of a road. The hand that turns the stone has done this 1,000 mornings and 1,000 evenings, and the wrist has learned to keep its own rhythm without thought. A grain caught in the seam of the stone gives a tiny ringing creak before it gives way. The sound is small. The sound is constant. The sound has been part of this house since before anyone in the house can remember it being anything else. 2 meals a day in this house. 2 meals in most Viking houses. The first is dagmal, the day meal, eaten perhaps an hour after rising, when the fire has been brought back from its embers and the porridge has had time to thicken. The second is nattmal, the night meal, eaten in the soft hours after the work is done and before the lamps go out. This is nattmal. Tonight's nattmal is barley, dried fish, and the last winter onion from the rope by the door, a small papery thing the size of a child's fist, its outer skins flaking like old letters. The young woman peels it slowly. Each layer of skin lifts and drifts down to the ash on the floor. The smell of it, sharp and green and sweet, opens up into the room and joins the smoke and the wool and the slow, warm broth. It is one of those smells that a body recognizes before a mind can. It says food. It says soon. There is no third meal coming, no bread at midnight, no second supper. After this the hearth is banked, the lamp is breathed out, and the house turns toward sleep. The body in a house like this learns to do without, and learns in return to feel a small kind of joy at the bowl that does come. The bowls themselves are wood, turned on a pole lathe a few doors down the lane 2 winters ago by a man who lived to make exactly this kind of thing. They are slightly different sizes. The largest one is the master's. The smaller ones are for the children. The smallest is for the smallest child, who has only just learned to hold it with 2 hands instead of 1. There are no plates. There are no forks. There will be no forks in this household, or this town, or this country for many centuries to come. Instead, there is the knife. Every adult in the room has one. The older boy has one. Even the middle child, perhaps 8 winters old, has a small one of her own, with a worn antler handle her grandfather carved. The knives ride at the belt all day in soft leather sheaths darkened by use. They cut bowstring in the morning. They trim a thumbnail at noon. They pare an apple in the afternoon. They whittle a peg for the wall in the late light. And when supper comes, they pick up a piece of dried fish, or a softened onion, or a corner of flatbread from the wooden bowl, and they bring it to the mouth. The same blade does everything. It is not strange. It is not unclean. It is simply in this century what a knife is. A knife is the longest tool a person carries, a sail needle of a thing, and it is meant to live in a hand the way a hand is meant to live in a sleeve. Many centuries from now, in a house with a different shape and a different fire, a stranger eating with a separate piece of cutlery in each hand will look like a kind of unsteady ritual to anyone who could see it from here. She slides her belt knife from its sheath now, balances the worn handle in her palm, and begins to flake the softened cod into the broth. The blade is short. The blade is dark with the patina of years. The blade has cut so much in so many quiet rooms that it has begun to belong to the hand as much as the hand belongs to the wrist. The cauldron stirs. The broth darkens. The barley, which has been simmering quietly, sends up small, slow bubbles. The smell becomes a different thing now. Fish and grain and onion, warm in iron with a fine line of dill from a small dried bundle hung by the door. She steps back from the fire. She wipes the knife on the corner of her apron and slides it back into its sheath at her hip. The slight metallic kiss of blade against leather is one of the small repeating sounds of this house, the way a kettle's whistle is the small repeating sound of another. Nobody looks up at it. Everyone hears it. Around the room, the others have begun, without being asked, to come a little closer to the hearth. The old man at the far wall lifts himself from his bench, slowly, one hand on the post. The middle child sets aside the small piece of bone she has been carving into something that wants to be a comb. The youngest brings her own bowl from the shelf and holds it carefully in both palms, as if the bowl itself were the supper and not the thing the supper would come into. There is no bell. There is no calling. There is no signal at all, in fact. The supper is simply ready, and the people who live here can feel that the supper is ready the way a body feels a held breath being let go. The cauldron comes off its chain. It is heavy. The young woman uses a folded cloth to lift it free and sets it on a flat stone at the hearth's edge, where the heat from below will keep it warm without cooking it any further. The ladle, Wood with a small carved bird on the end of the handle goes in, one slow turn, and the steam rises in a single soft column straight up into the smoke hole, and out and gone. She fills the master's bowl first, then the old man's, then the children's, in order of age, the smallest last. The broth steams in each of them, and then slowly stops steaming. Hands take up the bowls. The wooden rims touch chins. Bread is broken. Fish is lifted between thumb and blade. The barley is eaten with the small carved spoons that each person has owned since they were old enough to be trusted not to drop one in the fire. And in this house, the way it has been done in this house for as long as anyone can remember, and the way it will be done in houses like it for a long time still, nobody starts before the elders. Nobody finishes first and leaves. The food is shared, the room is shared, the warmth is shared, the small quiet sounds of eating are shared. A bowl in this household is not a private thing. It is one piece of a larger, slower table that no carpenter ever made, and no carpenter could. The cauldron rests on its stone. The fire mutters underneath. The wind eye above pulls one thin column of steam up into the cold. Outside, somewhere far down the lane, a dog barks once, then is quiet, and supper in a Viking house was never eaten alone or in silence. The last of the dried fish has been picked from the bowl. The bone-handled knives are wiped on a square of linen and set down beside the wooden trenchers. The grandmother leans back against the post, breathing slowly. The child rests an elbow on the table edge and looks, half asleep, toward the small inner doorway. Beyond that doorway is a narrow workroom, and beyond the workroom, in the deeper dark, are the cold tools of other houses along the lane. Tonight all those workshops are dark. Their benches sit empty. Their tools rest where their owners left them at dusk. A knife laid across a half-cut hide, an awl pushed point down into a block of soft wood, a small set of beads abandoned mid-string. The whole of Coppergate by day is a small industrial district. By night it is only the slow breath of banked fires through wattle walls. The same banked fire breath that lives in this room lives in every room along the lane. 100 small hearths, each almost out, each still warm. The father glances at the inner doorway. From here in the lamplight, the workroom's far edge is only a shape, but the shape is enough. He can name every tool on the bench by its silhouette. He made most of them himself. For this you must understand what the street outside this door actually is. It looks, from above, like a single muddy lane in a wooden city. But under that lane, packed into the strip of yards behind every door, is one of the busiest concentrations of craft in 10th century England. 1,000 years from now, when patient archaeologists open this same ground, they will lift more than 40,000 objects from it, small, dark, perfectly preserved by the waterlogged clay beneath the boardwalks, leather and amber, metal and wood, antler and textile, hundreds of plots, each with its own small story. The dig will take 9 years to finish. Coppergate, 1972 to 1981. The archaeologists will move down through the layers as if peeling an onion the wrong way newest skin first, oldest skin last, and as they sink, the centuries will unstack themselves. Norman shoes, Norse cup cores, anglo-saxon post holes, the street will reveal itself, level by level, as a small industrial district that hummed through the entire Viking age and well past it. Tonight in this house, none of that future is known. The father only knows the tools on his own bench, and the tools on the benches next door, and what each man and woman of the lane was making this afternoon before the light went out of the sky. 2 doors down, on the riverside, lives the leatherworker. His shop carries a smell that drifts down the whole lane on warm days. Wet hide, oak bark tannin, old grease, the soft sourness of soaked skins. Tonight, with the snow keeping every smell inside, the lane is quiet, but the smell is still there, under the snow, waiting. By morning, when the first door opens, and the first breath of cold air pulls at the smoke of the first re-stirred hearth, that leather smell will rise again into the lane, like an old friend coming back. The leatherworker's bench is a small museum of patient blades, a currier's knife with a long 2-handled edge used for shaving a hide to even thickness, a slicker, a flat stone or piece of hard horn used to smooth and burnish leather until it shines, a creaser for running a clean groove along the edge of a belt or a shoe, a row of awls in different gauges, fine to coarse, for stitching holes, and, at the center of the bench, the most important shape of all, a wooden last carved in the rough form of a foot, a shoemaker's last. Each pair of shoes is built around it, stitched while wet, allowed to dry to the shape of the wood. 1,000 years from now, the leather of his shoes will be lifted whole from the dark earth. Not just one shoe, hundreds of shoes, small shoes for children, long shoes for tall men, worn shoes patched at the heel, new shoes, sole stamped with a maker's mark never finished, belts, knife sheaths, bags, the cargo of a life pulled gently out of the mud, still curling at the edges where it dried. For now all of this rests. The courier's knife lies flat, the slicker waits beside it, the awls are pushed point down into a small block of soft wood, where they will not roll off the bench and will not cut a careless hand in the dark. Tomorrow, before the sun is up, the leather worker will be back at his place. Tonight the leather waits in its tubs, soaking quietly, doing the slow chemistry of becoming hide into something. Down the lane, in the other direction, lives the amber cutter. Her bench is smaller, the work is smaller, the tools are smaller, a few fine files, a bow drill for piercing beads, a small set of polishing stones, almost like a child's pebbles, and, around the base of her workbench, on the packed earth, the slow drift of amber cutter's dust, soft, pale, the color of dried honey. By day the dust catches the slant of winter light from the doorway and gives the whole shop a faint glow, as if she works at the edge of a quiet fire. The amber itself comes from far away. It is not local stone. It traveled from the cold coasts of the Baltic, carried south by other hands, traded west across the sea, and arrived in Coppergate as small rough lumps wrapped in cloth or stitched into leather pouches. She buys them from a trader who comes through twice a year. She breaks each lump, looks for a piece without cracks, and begins to cut. The other stone on her bench is not amber. It is darker, almost coal black, and it comes from much closer to home, from the Yorkshire coast, where the cliffs of Whitby crumble slowly into the sea. The cliff face gives up small black logs of jet, fossilized wood, hard, polishable, light in the hand. Children walk the beach after a storm and pick it from the shingle. The jet arrives in Coppergate in baskets, raw, salt-stained. Both stones become the same kinds of small thing on her bench: beads, finger rings, pendants, a bead for a child, a ring for a marriage, a pendant for a journey, hung at the throat under a tunic, where its smooth back warms against the skin and its carved face stays cool. By day her bench is loud with small work, the rasp of file on amber, the slow grind of a polishing stone, the patient creak of the bow drill turning in her fingers. Tonight it is silent. The files lie crossed on the bench like sleeping fingers. The polishing stones are stacked. The dust on the floor has settled, no longer caught in the doorway light. A small dish of finished beads sits at the back of the bench, covered with a square of linen, waiting for the trader's next visit. In these two, the leather worker and the amber cutter, are only 2 doors of one lane. Multiply them, and you begin to see what the street really is. A blacksmith 2 yards over, with his bellows folded shut for the night, his anvil cooling slowly from the day's last red, his floor scattered with curls of black scale and the small dark beads of dropped slag. A wood turner with his pole lathe leaned against the wall, his foot pedal still bound with twine, his floor strewn with curled shavings of birch and ash, soft as feathers underfoot. A bone worker who shapes pins and combs from antler and rib, his tools no bigger than a manicure set. A wool comber, a horn worker, a maker of small wooden boxes, a cup maker whose lathe gave Coppergate its very name. Copper Regatta, the street of the cup makers. Every plot has its trade, every trade has its tools, and every tool tonight is asleep on a wooden bench, waiting for the morning that is still many hours away. The father at his own table can feel the whole sleeping street through the walls of his house. He cannot see the workshops in the dark, but he knows them by sound, by smell, by who lives behind which door. When he was a boy, this knowledge was passed to him by his own father, the way one passes a heavy thing across a doorway, slowly, hand to hand. Now he is the one who knows, and soon the child half asleep against the table will know. Then there is the silver. This part of the story is the strangest and the easiest to forget. Among the 40,000 objects pulled from Coppergate's dark earth, 1,000 years from now, will be a small flat disk of silver, round, slightly thinner than a modern coin, stamped with letters none of the future archaeologists will need to translate, because the letters will be famous to them already. Arabic letters, the script of a mint 3,000 miles to the east, in the city of Baghdad. It is a dirham, a silver coin of the Abbasid Caliphate. It will have been minted by careful hands in a courtyard where the air smelled of jasmine and hot metal, and it will have travelled by hand, by cart, by riverboat, by sea, by hand again, by sea again, across the whole width of the known world, down the rivers of what is now Russia, across the Baltic, south into the markets of Hedeby, west into the holds of trading ships, north again into the Humber, up the river Ouse, into Jorvik, into the hand of a Coppergate merchant, into a small wooden box, onto a shelf, and finally in some quiet accident no one ever recorded, down into the packed earth of a single plot, to lie there 1,000 years. When the archaeologists lift it from the soil, they will hold a small piece of Baghdad between their gloved fingers. They will turn it slowly in the lamplight, and they will understand in a single quiet moment what the Viking trade arc actually was. Not a story of raids alone, not a story of one sea, a long thread of small hands passing small things, silver, amber, fur, beads, wax, glass, walrus ivory, across half the world, Newfoundland on the west end of the thread, Central Asia on the east, and, in the middle, this small wooden city of perhaps 10,000 souls, sitting quietly under its winter snow. The father does not own a dirham. He has held one once at the trader's table. It was cold in his palm. The letters meant nothing to him, but he remembers the weight, and he remembers that the man who showed it to him said the words Baghdad the way you say the name of a far mountain, with respect and with the small smile of someone who has only heard of the place from another person who had also only heard of it. Now in the warmth of his own house, the silver is somewhere on the lane. He does not know which plot. He does not need to know. It is enough that, somewhere within 100 paces of this hearth, a small disk of metal minted 3,000 miles east sleeps in a wooden box on a wooden shelf, in a workshop where the tools are also sleeping, in a street where every craft has folded its hands for the night. The mother gets up gently to bring more peat for the fire. The grandmother shifts on her bench. The child's head has slipped sideways onto a folded sleeve. The dog by the threshold lifts one ear, decides it was nothing, and lowers it again. The lamp gives one slow yellow tongue through the dark, the same yellow tongue it has given all evening, the same yellow tongue every house along the lane is keeping alive in its own small bowl of fish oil. Outside, the lane is a row of dark workshops under a thin shawl of snow. The leather waits in its tubs. The amber cutter's dust has settled. The blacksmith's anvil has gone the color of cold iron. The cup-maker's lathe rests against the wall like a leaning ladder, and beneath one floorboard, in one plot, somewhere along the row, the small silver disk of Baghdad is doing what it has always done, waiting for the next pair of hands. The father turns back to the hearth. The flame catches his face and softens it. The room draws inward. The whole street is asleep already, or close to it. Only this one room is still gently awake. And within the warm circle of the hearth, the talking began. Someone reaches up and lifts a drinking horn down from its wooden ring on the wall. It comes free with a small wooden knock, the sound of bone against pine, and the horn settles into a waiting hand as if it had grown there. The horn is dark with use, polished by 100 winters of palms. Its mouth is wide, its bottom narrows to a stubborn point. An iron pot of ale is lifted from the hearthstones. The ale has been warming there, slow and patient, all evening. It is the color of weak honey. It is barely strong enough to call a drink. A wooden ladle dips. The horn fills. A small mist rises off the surface, the way breath rises off the river at dusk. The hand that holds the horn is the grandfather's hand. It is a hand that has done many things in a long life. It has held the tiller of a small fishing boat in the cold mouth of the Ouse. It has folded around the handle of an axe and around the small head of a newborn grandchild. Tonight it is holding a horn full of warm, thin ale on an ordinary winter night, and that, the hand seems to say, is also a good use of itself. And here is the first quiet thing to know about this house, and about every house like it from Greenland to the Volga. A drinking horn cannot be set down. The horn has no foot. There is nothing flat at its base, no small wooden plinth, no clever circle of brass to hold it upright on the table. It tapers to a point. Once it has been filled, the holder is the stand. You drink, or you pass it on, or you keep it in your palm. Empty horns return to their rings on the wall, where they wait for the next pouring. There they hang in a row above the bench, dark and curved, like small sleeping animals. Full horns belong to hands. It is a small rule, and 1,000 years old, and a thoroughly practical one. A cocktail rule that the medieval North agreed on long before there were cocktails. It kept the cup in motion. It kept the company drinking together rather than alone. It made it almost rude to nurse a horn at the side of the room. The horn moved. The talk moved with it. A modern listener might think of a glass of wine left on a table while its drinker wanders away to look at a painting. A horn cannot do that. A horn cannot wander. A horn cannot be forgotten beside a candle. Once a horn has been poured, the evening has taken hold of it, and the evening will not let it go until the horn is empty, or until it goes home to its ring on the wall. The grandfather is the first to drink. This is the old, quiet courtesy. He lifts the rim to his beard and tilts the horn just a little, the way a man tilts a candle to read by, and the warm ale goes down in a slow, unhurried draught. He does not finish it. He passes the horn to his left, to the son, who passes it to the daughter-in-law, who eventually passes it back across the hearth. Watch what the horn is doing. It is keeping the circle a circle. It is a small wheel of warmth turning around the fire. In a corner, a child too small for ale watches the horn travel and thinks, perhaps, that it must be a kind of clock. It returns to the same hand at the same speed, the way the sun returns to the same window each morning. The child is half right. The horn is a clock. It measures the evening in passes. A second thing to know while the horn goes round. What is in it tonight is ale, and only ale, and that matters. Ale in this house is daily. Ale is what the working day is washed down with. It is brewed thin and weak, and a little sour, gently warmed at the hearth side because the cold strips the taste from anything cold. Ale is what the children dilute in drink. Ale is what the grandmother drinks while she works. Ale is the bread of the table in cup form. Mead is something else. Mead is sweeter, stronger, made with honey, and it does not come down off the shelf for a Tuesday. Mead is for weddings, for the slow funerals where the long stories are told, for midwinter when the sun has gone away and must be drunk back into the sky. Mead is for the names of the dead and the names of the newly born. Mead is brought out when the room must remember itself. Tonight is an ale night. Tonight is a Tuesday in the middle of a long winter. There is no event. There is only the family and the warmth and the slow turning of the horn. The mead jug sits unopened on a high shelf above the bench, behind a small linen cloth. It will sit there for many more weeks. It will come down at midwinter, perhaps, when the sun has reached the bottom of its arc and must be coaxed back upward with sweetness and with song. For now it watches the room from above, quiet and full and patient, and does not interrupt, and that in its way is the most ordinary kind of luxury, a horn that goes round and round on a night with no name attached to it. The grandfather sets the horn back into his palm and clears his throat. The room knows what this means. Stories are about to begin. In a house with no books, the keeper of memory is the voice, and in Norse houses, the voice has rules. The grandfather's voice settles into a different shape now. It is not quite singing, it is not quite speaking. It is the shape that old voices fall into when they are carrying a poem that does not belong to them, a poem they have been holding for someone else. The verse he speaks is built on a kind of inner scaffolding. The first half of each line carries two strong sounds, S perhaps, or H, or F. The second half of the line picks up one of those same sounds and answers it back, sound to sound, stress to stress, like a key turning in a lock and the lock turning back. This is called alliterative meter, and it is the bone of all old Germanic poetry. The Norse skalds, the poets, the memory keepers, built their verse on it, and the rule was strict. Break the alliteration and you broke the poem. But the strictness was the point. The rigid meter held sound to sound the way a chain holds link to link. A poem with this kind of inner lock was almost impossible to misremember. If a word slipped, the alliteration broke, and the listener heard the break the way a musician hears a flat note. The poem corrected itself out of the speaker's mouth, and so a verse could pass down 4 generations of voices, great-grandfather, grandfather, father, son, and still match itself almost word for word at the end of 100 years. The meter was the preservative. The form held the content the way salt holds fish through a winter. A memory machine disguised as music. The grandfather knows the poem because his father knew it, and his father's father knew it, and somewhere back in the cold past, before there were any of them, somebody first set it inside its lock and gave it away. He recites a long passage now, slow in pairs, with small held silences at the end of each stanza. The fire pops in the silences and seems to be listening. The poem is about a ship. It is always partly about a ship. It is about a long voyage in a small wooden hull, and the men on the deck, and the grey water under them, and one of them who did not come home. The names in it are old. Some are no longer used. The children do not understand all of the words, but they understand the shape of it. The shape is enough. The horn goes round again. The grandmother takes her draught and passes it on. The youngest aunt smiles into a sleeve at a small joke embedded inside the poem that only she has caught. Outside, the snow on Coppergate keeps falling in its slow blue way. The boards under the snow do not know they are being walked over by a verse from another century. The smoke from the wind-eye lifts up into the dark sky in its pale column and joins the columns from the other 100 hearths, and somewhere in that rising smoke the words of the poem rise too, repeated tonight in this house, repeated last winter in a house in Dublin, repeated 3 winters ago in a house in Trondheim, the same locked sound moving from one warmth to the next. The grandfather finishes the long passage and lets the silence hold for a moment. Then he begins a smaller piece, a kenning, a little verbal puzzle of the kind the skalds loved. A ship is called the horse of the wave, the sea is called the whale's road, gold is called the fire of the river. Each kenning is a tiny picture lifted out of a long memory and set on the table for everyone to look at. The child by the wall mouths Wales Road silently, tasting it, turning it over the way another child in another century will turn a sweet on the tongue. A kenning is a small gift the language gives to itself. It is a riddle and an answer at the same time. Battle sweat for blood, sky candle for sun, wound sea for the same red sea the battle sweat comes from. Each one folds a picture inside a picture, and the listener, even a small listener half asleep against a wall, unfolds it without knowing how. The Norse mind loved this kind of work. It is a kind of play that doubles as a way of remembering, and the room around the hearth listens to it the way a modern room listens to a familiar song. The horn comes back to the grandfather, and he holds it without drinking. He is thinking. The room waits for him without impatience. A Viking evening is not in a hurry. When he begins the next verse, his voice is softer. The poem he chooses now is short and gentle, a kind of small night piece. It is the verse a grandfather chooses when the small heads in the corner are beginning to nod against the wall. The lamp's tongue of light leans slightly. The cat in the basket by the wall sighs. The dog by the threshold does not lift his head at all. And while the grandfather speaks, you can feel the room doing a quiet thing. The faces around the hearth are easing. The shoulders are coming down. The talk between the verses has gone half-whispered. The horn has been passing more slowly for a while now, and on its last circuit it is more than half full when it returns to the wall ring, and there it stays. The horn knocks softly against its wooden ring as it is set back, the same small sound that began the evening, only quieter now, the way a closing door is quieter than an opening one. The grandfather speaks one last small piece, a couplet maybe, no more than the length of a held breath, and lets his voice go. The fire in the hearthstones has burned down to a low red mound. The smoke is still rising through the wind-eye in its faithful column. The lamp is still burning its slow yellow tongue at the edge of the bench. Outside, the snow is still falling on Coppergate in its quiet blue way, and somewhere down the lane another house is doing exactly what this house is doing, passing a horn, holding a verse, settling. A small wind moves through the wind-eye in the roof. It carries the last of the verse out into the dark, where it joins the smoke and goes wherever those things go. And after the story, the room slowly emptied of voices and filled instead with breath about belief. On one peg, Low on the post nearest the bed, a small wooden cross hangs from a strip of leather. On the peg beside it, no more than a hand's width away, a small iron hammer hangs from a thong of its own. The cross is plain. The hammer is the shape that any Viking child of this century would have recognized at a glance. The short, blunt-headed shape of Mjolnir, the weapon of Thor. Neither charm is hidden. Neither charm is more polished than the other. They sit on their pegs the way ordinary household objects sit, slightly dusty, slightly worn by the brush of a sleeve passing, a hand reaching past. The two charms have lived here together for years. In the soft light of the banked hearth, they cast two small shadows on the wall behind them, side by side, one a cross and one a hammer, and the shadows do not quarrel. They lean toward each other a little when the fire shifts, and lean away again when it settles, in the way that any two small objects on a wall will keep each other company through a long winter night. The child in the box bed has noticed the two shadows once or twice, in the slow half-attention of a child being put to sleep, and has decided in the way that children decide such things, that the cross and the hammer are friends. No one in the room has corrected him. There is for now nothing to correct. There is something in this household, and in thousands of households like it across Viking England in the late 10th century, that the textbooks of later centuries have struggled to describe in a single word. The people who lived here were not exactly pagan. They were not exactly Christian. They were both at the same time, in a quiet and practical way, and they saw no contradiction in it. The Norse who settled in England rarely replaced their gods with Christ. They added him. Christ was a new figure on a shelf that already held Odin, Thor, Freya, Freyja, and a long list of smaller spirits whose names the household still murmured at certain doorways and certain wells. Adding one more figure to that shelf was, for many Norse-descended families, not a betrayal of the old gods. It was simply hospitality, extended toward a god who had come a long way to be among them. Archaeologists, digging in the soil of this very century, have lifted out the proof. In graves across northern England and southern Scandinavia, men and women have been found buried with a small Christian cross resting against their collarbone, and, on the same leather thong or close beside it, a small iron Mjolnir hammer. Two charms, one body, one grave. Not a half conversion, a whole inheritance doubled. The hand that hung those charms did not see it as confusion. It saw it as fullness. In some workshops, in this very era, stone molds have been unearthed in which the smith cast both kinds of pendant, Mjolnir on one face of the stone, a Christian crucifix on the other. The same craftsman with the same hammer and the same crucible of melted silver would pour into one mold on a Tuesday and the other on a Thursday, and walk out at the end of the week with both hanging on his belt string, ready for sale to whichever neighbor passed by. No one in the marketplace thought this odd. A villager might buy a hammer for the boy, and a cross for the daughter, and a small bone amulet of some other shape for the grandmother, and all three would be tied around all three necks before the week was out. In this household, on this winter night, The cross and the hammer have been hanging on their pegs for as long as the youngest child can remember. He has reached up for them once or twice, the way small children reach for any small object, and his mother has taken his fingers gently away each time. They are not toys, they are not magic. They are the way the house faces the dark. The grandmother, sitting now nearest the hearth, has lived through 3 quiet shifts of belief in her own lifetime. She remembers the priest who came up the lane when she was a girl, a thin man in a brown robe with a wooden cross on his chest, who spoke in a careful, halting English-Norse mix and asked permission before entering any door. She remembers her own grandmother, who refused the new god out of stubbornness, but kept a small whittled cross on her loom anyway, in case the man with the careful voice had been right. The grandmother today is not stubborn. She has made room. She has, in the way of her people, simply made room. The room she has made is no larger than the space between 2 pegs on a single post, but it is enough. A whole century of belief can hang from 2 leather thongs if the household is patient enough to let both thongs stay. The missionaries who came to Viking England in those decades were practical men. They knew that asking a household to throw away the gods of 300 years would only close every door against them. Instead, they came with what historians would later call accommodation. A willingness to baptize the door, to bless the hearth, to plant a small cross on the threshold, without insisting that the iron hammer above the bed be taken down. They built their first churches on ground that was already considered sacred, on hilltops where the old gods had been honored, on springs whose waters had been left offerings for 100 generations, beside trees whose names had once been the names of spirits. The new building did not erase the old place. It absorbed it. The carvings on some of the earliest stone crosses in the north of England show this absorption in their own quiet way. A figure that looks at first like a haloed Christ stands in armor with a long blade or a hammer-shaped object in his hand, and the figure beside him might be Mary or might be a Valkyrie, depending on which old eye looks at the stone. The missionaries painted Christ in colors their listeners could see. They told stories in which Christ was a warrior king who had out-wrestled death, because that was a story a Norse listener could carry home and tell again over an ale cup. Conversion in such a place did not happen in a single Sunday. It happened across grandmothers and grandchildren, across 3 or 4 generations, in a long soft drift, the way snow comes onto a roof. By the time the last grandmother stopped naming Thor at the door, no one quite remembered when the naming had stopped. The hammer simply hung there, on the peg, and no one took it down, because taking it down felt unkind to something old and faithful. Inside this house tonight, after the story of the horn is finished and the voices have lowered, the grandmother sits a little forward in her seat and folds her hands in her lap. The 2 younger women have stopped working. The men have stopped speaking. Even the child, who is half asleep in the box bed already, has gone still. The grandmother begins her evening prayer. It is not a long prayer. It is not loud. It is, in fact, almost a hum, the kind of low, half-shaped sound that a person makes to themselves while threading a needle, except that the words in it are real words, and the listening of the room is real. She names neither god directly. She does not say Thor. She does not say Christ. She names instead, in a voice that has worn the words smooth as river pebbles, the one who keeps the gate at night, the one who watches the threshold, the one whose hand is on the latch when the household is asleep, the one to whom the small offering of bread is sometimes laid at the doorpost on the first hard frost. The prayer is older than either charm on the wall. It is older, perhaps, than the longhouse itself. It belongs to the kind of belief that lived in households before priests and before sagas, when a family stood at its own threshold at sundown and asked, in plain words, for the night to pass kindly. It is a prayer that fits inside both worlds without breaking either one. The cross on its peg can hear it. The hammer on its peg can hear it. The grandmother does not have to choose, and she has spent 80 winters not choosing, and her family has not been struck down for it, and the house has not fallen in, so she will go on not choosing for the few winters she has left. The Norse heart in this corner of England at this point in history had room for more than one god, and it kept that room for a long time. The prayer reaches its small end. The grandmother lifts her chin a moment and is quiet. The others around the hearth are quiet with her. There are still in the dark beams above the hearth small carvings that no priest has ever asked the family to remove. Knotwork along the doorpost in the old Norse style, a tiny rune scratched on the underside of one rafter for luck in childbirth, a worn leather pouch nailed up by the threshold with 3 dried herbs inside it from a grandmother further back than anyone now remembers. None of it is paraded, none of it is announced. It is the quiet furniture of belief, layered into the bones of the house the way ash has layered into the floor. The cross and the hammer are only the 2 visible pieces. Behind them, around them, threaded through the rafters and the doorpost and the box bed, there is a long quiet weave of older things, and a newer thing, and the older and the newer have agreed to share the room. Outside, the snow continues to fall in the dark. The smoke hole still lets one pale star look down into the room from time to time when the smoke thins. The star, of course, belongs to no god in particular. It belonged in older centuries to Frigg, perhaps, or to a forgotten dwarfsmith. It belongs now, in the language of the priest's sermon, to the maker of heaven and earth. The star itself does not seem to mind which version is told beneath it. The 2 charms on their pegs catch a slow shift of firelight and shine briefly. The small iron of the hammer and the small worn wood of the cross, and the shine is the same shine indistinguishable from across the room. For a moment they are simply 2 small things hanging on 2 small pegs, made by hands that wanted the household to be safe, hung by hands that believed the household would be safer with them than without them. The names of the gods behind them have stepped, for that moment, into the background, and only the wish for safety remains. The grandmother lowers her hands at last, and lets out a long, slow breath that the whole hearth seems to breathe with her. The youngest child in the box bed has by now fallen all the way asleep. The 2 younger women lean back into their seats. One of them reaches absently and rests her fingertips for a moment against the wooden cross on its peg, not as worship exactly, but as one touches the doorframe of a familiar room. Then her fingertips move just as absently to the iron hammer beside it, and rest there for another moment. Both gestures take less than a breath. She seems unaware that she has made either of them. The fire pops once, low, a small log shifting on the bed of embers. The smoke rises in its straight pale column toward the wind eye. The cold blue square of sky above it deepens another shade. There is something restful about a room in which the gods do not need to be sorted out before bed. They have been allowed to stand on their pegs together. The household has not been asked to decide. The grandmother has not been asked to choose between the prayer of her childhood and the prayer of her great-granddaughter. The house, in its long, patient way, holds both, and beyond the praying voices, the smaller lives of the room had already begun to settle, and so after the praying voices had thinned to almost nothing, the attention of the room drifted upward and outward and into the small corners where the larger story was no longer paying attention. The rafters above the hearth were dark with 1,000 winters of smoke, and on one of the crossbeams, halfway between the smoke hole and the back wall, a hen was already asleep with her head tucked under one wing. She had climbed there at dusk on her own, the way every hen in every winter house climbed there, by a kind of ancient agreement no one had ever written down. From below she was almost invisible, only the faint pale bar of her tail feathers, when the lamp leaned a certain way, gave her away. Lower, against the threshold itself, lay the household dog. He was a thick grey spitz with a curled tail and a black muzzle, the kind of dog these northern people had bred for so many centuries that the breed had long since stopped being a choice and become a region. 1,000 years from now a southern country will give this dog a new name and call him a Norwegian elkhound, but here on this packed earth floor he is simply the dog. He has placed himself across the door because that is what he has always done. His back is to the cold timber of the door frame. His belly is to the warmth of the room. If the wind shifts at the threshold, he will feel it before anyone wakes. If a footstep comes onto the boardwalk outside, his ears will lift before his head does. For most of the evening he is not moved. Once an hour ago he turned his head toward the smoke hole because a piece of soot fell. Once, earlier still, he yawned, and the yawn made a small thin sound at the back of his throat that nobody noticed. That has been his contribution to the night. The Norse loved their dogs in a way that left small careful traces in the ground, a fine collar, a favorite bone, sometimes the dog itself laid down beside its owner when the owner had to be laid down. But the dog at the threshold tonight is not thinking about any of that. He is thinking, in the slow way a dog thinks, about the smell of the wool cloaks on the wall pegs, and about the smell of the goats in the yard behind the wall, and about how the embers, after the supper fire has died down, make a sound that is almost like another animal breathing. Some way from the dog, against the inside of the south wall, there is a basket. It is a low oval basket made of woven willow, the same willow as the wattle walls of the house, and inside it lies an old worn cloak that the woman of the house stopped wearing 2 winters ago. The cloak was once a deep brown. It is now the color of weak tea. The hem is frayed. There are small darker patches where someone years back mended it with thread of a slightly different shade and did not bother to match it perfectly. That cloak is now a bed. In the bed is a grey cat. She is curled into the tightest possible circle, the tip of her tail laid across her own nose, her front paws tucked under her chin, her eyes shut so completely that the seam of each eyelid has almost disappeared. From above she looks like a small grey stone wrapped in old brown wool. She is breathing, but the breath is so quiet that even the closest listener would have to stop their own breath to find hers. She has been there since the supper bowls were cleared. There are cats in this house. There have been cats in this house since before the woman who owns it was born. The lane outside, and the workshops on the lane, and the houses up and down the lane, all keep cats, small grey cats, small ginger cats, half-wild kitchen cats that come in for the warmth and the mice, and stay only as long as both are good. When archaeologists open the dark layer of Coppergate 1,000 years from now, they will find cat bones in the same soil as the wooden cup cores, and the leather offcuts, and the amber dust, the small unannounced citizens of the city, sleeping in the same dirt as the work tools that made the city's name. The cats were not pets in the modern sense. They were quiet partners. They kept the grain barrel honest. They kept the pillows free of the small dry rustle in the straw at 3 in the morning that turns out to be a mouse. In return, the household gave them the warmest corner near the wall, and an old cloak nobody wanted any more, and a small saucer of milk on the rare nights when there was milk to spare. Tonight the grey cat in her basket is so deeply gone that her ears are no longer paying attention. They are folded slightly forward, slack, the way a cat's ears go only in the deepest part of sleep. The fire crackled once, gently, a few minutes ago, and her ears did not even twitch. Beyond the back wall of the room, through the wattle and the daub and the thatch, and the second small door that opens into the yard, there is the byre. It is not part of the house. It is a small lean-to of timber and turf and woven willow, attached to the back of the house the way a child leans against a parent's leg, sharing the parent's warmth without quite being inside the parent's coat. The roof of the byre is low. The floor is straw over packed earth. The animals there tonight are the small everyday animals of an ordinary Coppergate household. 1 nanny goat, 2 ewes, a half-grown lamb who is the daughter of one of them, and who is already at 4 months old, the most curious creature in the yard. The goat is lying down. She has folded her front legs neatly under her chest, and tucked her chin almost to her knees. Her eyes are half closed, and her jaw moves slowly, sideways, on a cud that she will keep working for most of the night without ever quite finishing. The 2 ewes are pressed against her flank, their wool thick and oily with winter lanolin, smelling faintly of the meadow they last grazed in the autumn. The lamb is asleep between them with her nose tucked into her mother's belly fleece. Their breath, when it leaves them, is a small visible plume in the cold air of the byre. The plume rises and thins and meets the plume of the next breath, and the whole byre is faintly warmer than the night outside because of nothing more than the patient breathing of 4 animals stood close together. Above them, on a wooden ledge that the man of the house nailed up last spring, sits another hen. There are several hens. Most of them are inside the house with the rooster on the rafter, but this one prefers the byre and the company of the goat, and so she has her own corner here, with a small twist of straw for a nest, and she sleeps with her feathers fluffed out into a perfect grey ball. The wattle of the back wall is thin. From the inside of the house, if everyone were quiet, and everyone now is, you could hear the goat's slow chew, the small shift of a ewe's hoof on the straw, the faint clucking sigh the hen made just before sleep. None of these sounds are loud enough to wake anyone. They are part of what the house is on a winter night, the way the sound of a kitchen at rest is part of what a modern home is, except softer and warmer and older. The animals are not in the room, but they are not far. They are just on the other side of one wall, breathing into the cold, keeping each other alive. By the front door, just inside the threshold, and just on the warm side of the sleeping dog, there is a small pile of strange-looking objects. From a distance, by lamplight, they could be mistaken for kitchen tools or scraps of bone left over from supper. They are not. They are the children's ice skates. A pair of them lies nearest the door. Each skate is a long, polished length of bone, the long bone from the leg of a horse, flattened on one side by patient rubbing with a stone and a little river sand, drilled at each end with a single small hole. A leather thong runs through each hole, and a small wooden peg holds the thong in place. To use them, a child sits down in the snow, lashes the bone flat side down to the sole of each boot, stands up carefully, takes a long branch in both hands, and pushes herself along the frozen river the way a boatman poles a punt. The bones glide, the river holds. 1,000 years from now, in the same dark Coppergate soil, archaeologists will find 42 pairs of these bone skates, mostly carved from horse leg bones, a few from cattle long bones, all of them polished on one face by the long quiet friction of children sliding on ice. They will lay them out in rows on a museum table and label them with small white cards, and the cards will say bone skate, around the year 900, Coppergate, child use. Long before there were schools to keep them indoors, long before there were clocks to hurry them home, the children of Jorvik laced bone to boot and skated the frozen river Ouse for hours, until the cold reached their fingers through the wool, and their mothers called them in for natmal. Tonight the skates are by the door because tonight the children skated. The river froze hard enough this week. The leather thongs are still slightly damp from melted snow, and they will not be fully dry by morning, but they will be dry enough. The 2 children of this house, a boy of perhaps 9 and a girl of perhaps 6, are already asleep on the family bed, their cheeks still faintly pink from cold air and from laughter, their hair smelling of wood smoke and river. They did not stay up to put the skates away properly. Someone older did that for them, lifting the small bones one by one out of the pile of wet boots, and laying them carefully where they would dry without splitting. The embers in the long hearth have settled into a low orange seam down the center of the floor. The wood is no longer cracking. The flames are gone. What is left is the slow, steady heart of the fire, coals that will glow for hours yet, kept under a thin grey blanket of ash by the last hand that touched them. The lamp by the wall is still lit, but only just. The wick has been trimmed short, and the small yellow tongue of flame is no taller than a fingernail. In this dimmer light, the room has become a place of small breathing shapes. The hen on the rafter, the dog across the threshold, the cat in her cloak basket, the goat and the ewes and the lamb and the second hen beyond the wall. None of them are speaking, none of them are working, none of them are paying any attention to the others, and yet all of them together in this small frame of timber and willow and packed earth are holding the night between them, each one's warmth adding to the next, each one's quiet adding to the next, the way a cord is held by many fingers at once. The dog at the door lets out one long, slow breath through his nose. The cat in the basket shifts her tail 1/4 of an inch and stills again. The hen on the rafter does not move at all. Somewhere outside, very far, a single faint sound, a neighbor's door closing perhaps, or a piece of snow falling off a thatch, comes once and is gone. And beyond the cat and the dog and the embers, the bed was already waiting. Step outside the door for a moment before going in. Stand on the threshold of the room and let your eyes pass once more across it. The hearth keeps its low orange line down the center of the floor. The cat sleeps in the basket by the wall. The dog has folded himself against the threshold, nose toward the cold. The animals in the backyard byre have stopped moving. The supper plates have been wiped with a crust of bread and set on the bench. The cup has gone back to its peg. By all the small signs the day has, the day is over. And yet somewhere in the corner of the room something is still moving. Not quickly, not in any way that draws attention, but once you have noticed it, you cannot stop noticing it. A small, slow rotation, a soft circular travel through the warm air near the hearth, a whisper of fiber under a thumb. The woman of the house is still working. Tonight's last work is hers. She sits on a low stool, close enough to the embers that the firelight finds the side of her face. Her shawl is pulled around her shoulders. In her left hand she holds a small bundle of carded wool, tucked into the bend of her arm like a sleeping kitten. From her right hand hangs a wooden stick the length of a forearm, and at the lower end of that stick, just above the floor, a small stone disc turns and turns and turns. It is the drop spindle. It has been turning in this house and in this town and across the cold sea for as long as anyone can remember. The stone disc, the part that does the turning, sits at the bottom of the spindle like a small weight. In her hand it would be no larger than a small plum. It weighs perhaps 30 grams, no more. It is made of grey stone, smoothed by years of palms. There is nothing rare about it. There is nothing precious about it. And yet there is something quietly remarkable about an object so small. Tools just like it appear in every Viking Age layer of soil across northern Europe. They turn up in farmsteads and in towns, in graves and in middens, in the cold mud of fishing villages and in the deep loam of mountain valleys. They are so common that an archaeologist might call them a kind of textile fossil, the small, patient signature of every woman who has ever sat by a hearth at the end of a day. A whorl pulled out of a Coppergate plot, 1,000 years from this very night, will fit the palm of a museum visitor exactly. Their fingers will close around it the same way her fingers close around it now. The shape was right then. The shape will still be right then. There is a small mercy in that. She moves her thumb and forefinger once down the bundle in her left hand. A few fibers tease themselves free, and she catches them between her fingertips. With her right hand she gives the spindle a small flick. The stone disc takes the motion and runs with it. It begins to turn beneath her hand, slow and steady, drawing the new fibers into a thread as it falls. The thread lengthens. The spindle drops a little. When it reaches her ankle, she will stop it, wind the new thread up around the shaft, and start the small turning again. Pull, twist, wind, pull, twist, wind. The motion is older than the town, older than the name Jorvik, older than the language she is using to think about the next bowl of barley. The soft whir of the spindle is the only new sound in the room. Even the fire has settled into its quietest stage of the night, where the logs no longer crack but only breathe. The cat's ear twitches once at the sound, and then forgets it. The dog does not lift his head. They have known this small whir all their lives. To them it is part of the room, the way the smell of peat smoke is part of the room, and the soft give of ash underfoot is part of the room. It is the kind of sound a body learns to fall asleep to without knowing that it has. Somewhere on the far side of the wattle wall, a neighbour's spindle may be turning at the same slow pace, in the same small firelight, with the same small whir. Down the length of Coppergate, in house after house, at the end of every long winter day, the same small motion is happening. Many hands, many spindles, many slow rotations through the warm air. The town is quietly spinning itself a little more cloth before sleep. Against the back wall, taller than she is, leans the loom. It stands quietly, in shadow, almost invisible from the doorway. It is the warp-weighted upright loom, the standard loom of the Norse world, found in every household that produces its own cloth, which is to say nearly every household. Two upright timbers, perhaps a little taller than a tall man, a horizontal beam at the top, on which the finished cloth is rolled, and hanging down from the warp threads, a row of small weights, clay, baked hard, each perhaps a kilogram in the hand. The weights keep the warp threads taut. Without the weights, the cloth would not hold its tension. Without the tension, the weave would slacken into nothing. She is not weaving tonight. She has spent the long, bright part of the afternoon at the loom, passing the weft yarn back and forth between the rows of warp, beating each pass tight with the wooden sword. Now the loom rests. The weights hang, very nearly still, in two soft lines at the bottom of the warp. Sometimes, when the wind tests the wattle wall behind the loom, the weights brush against one another. The faintest small clack reaches the hearth, 2 or 3 small clacks in a row, and then silence again. It is not really a sound at all. It is the suggestion of a sound. It is the wall remembering that the weather is still out there. A cloak, she thinks, though she is not really thinking. She is mostly watching the fire. A cloak is a long thing. The wool first has to be sorted. The longer fibers go one way, the shorter go to felting and stuffing. Then the wool has to be carded, combed between 2 paddles. until the fibers lie in the same direction, soft and willing. Then the spinning, and only after enough thread has been spun, the warp can be set up on the loom and the weaving can begin. A single adult cloak, the kind that will sit on a husband's shoulders all next winter, perhaps 100 hours of work, between the carding and the spinning and the setting and the weaving and the finishing. 100 hours, spread across many evenings, many quiet hours like this one, at the edge of many fires. When you saw a man in the street today, walking out across the boards above the mud with his cloak heavy on his shoulders, that cloak was a season of someone's patience. The wool on every Viking back was a months-long act of patience. The shawl on her own shoulders, slightly worn at the hem, took her a winter and a part of a spring some years ago. She remembers the color of the wool more clearly than she remembers the year. The spindle reaches her ankle. She catches it gently, lifts it back up to her lap, and winds the new thread around the shaft in slow loops. Then she gives the spindle another small flick, and it begins again, that slow patient travel down through the warm air toward the floor. In another part of the room the lamp has burned down a little. The small soapstone bowl no longer holds much oil. The single yellow tongue has shortened, and it leans now slightly toward the wall. She does not get up to feed it. There is no need. Most of the work that the lamp had to do has already been done. The supper, the wiping, the small last of the day tidying. What remains is only this, the spindle, the firelight, the slow turning. A child mumbles something from the box bed on the far wall, half a word inside a dream, and then is quiet again. She does not turn her head. She has heard those small sleeping mumbles for years. The child will not wake. The dream will pass. The wool in her lap smells very faintly of the sheep it came from, and of the small soft oil that wool keeps about it even after it has been washed. It is a smell that lives in this house through the whole of every winter. By the end of the cold months, the smell of wool and the smell of peat smoke and the smell of the slow-burning lamp have become a single smell, and that single smell is what the children of this house will, for the rest of their lives, mean when they say the word home. Outside, the wind has dropped. The boardwalk above the mud has frozen hard. The river beyond the walls of the town is solid now, with a pale blue light across it, and the houses lining the lane are nothing but low dark shapes, with one or two dim doorway glows still left along the row. The smoke rising from each smoke hole has thinned to almost nothing, since most fires in Jórvík have been banked for the night. In this house the fire still has a little more living to do. Not much, but a little. And so the spindle still has a little more turning to do, and the loom still leans in its corner like a quiet, attentive animal. She does not count her thread. She does not count the rotations. She does not count the minutes. The work has a shape that her hands know, and her eyes can half close while her fingers continue. The skill is older than she is. Her mother taught her, sitting on this same low stool, in firelight not very different from this firelight. Her mother was taught by her own mother. The hands learn the motion, and the motion teaches the next pair of hands, and so the thread continues across the generations, as well as down through the warm air toward the floor. After a long while, long enough that the fire has lost another small log to itself, and the lamp has tilted a little further. Her eyes have grown heavy, her thumb still tests the fiber, the spindle still drops, but the motion has begun to slow. The flicks of her wrist are softer. The wool unwinds from the distaff in her lap more lazily. The whirl turns one rotation where before it turned 3. She is not sleepy yet, not properly, but she has reached the part of the evening where the work is doing itself, and her body is beginning to listen elsewhere, to the bed against the wall, to the warm, slow breathing of the children already in it, to the empty space at the edge of the fur where her own shape will fit. The spindle slows once more. She does not flick it again. Slowly, slowly, it stops turning. The thread hangs straight down from her fingers, a small new length of yarn in the firelight. She lifts the spindle into her lap, gathers the loose wool back into the distaff, and ties the new thread off around the shaft. Tomorrow in the morning light, she will start again. Tomorrow there will be more to spin. There is always more to spin. For now she sets the spindle down beside her stool. The wool goes back into its small basket. The shawl tightens around her shoulders. The fire has settled to its lowest line of orange. The loom in the corner does not move. The weights hang quietly against one another. The cat does not stir. The dog does not lift his head. And in the soft, warm circle of the hearth, the day's last small whirring has come, finally, to rest. And as the spindle slowed in her hand, the room began to think about the bed. Step outside the door for a moment before going in. Stand on the threshold. The night beyond the wattle is the kind of cold that has weight to it, a pressure on the lungs, a slow stiffening of the small bones of the hand. Above the roofline, the sky is emptied of cloud. The stars are very high and very precise, and the smoke from the roof hole rises straight up into them without bending. There is no wind tonight, only the cold, and the cold in this century has more soldiers than any king. Step back inside. Close the door behind you. The latch is leather and oak, and falls into its catch with a small dull tap, and the room receives you again as it always does, with smoke, with the faint sweet rot of old straw, with the low orange of the hearth banked for the long hours. The talking has stopped. The spindle in the woman's basket lies on its side. The loom in the corner has gone back to being a sleeping animal. The dog by the threshold lifts his head, sees that nothing has changed, and lets it back down onto his paws. Across the room, against the long wall, the bed is waiting. It is not a bed in the way the listener's bed is a bed. It is a wooden box built into the wall itself, low to the ground, deep enough for 3 or 4 bodies side by side, walled on 3 sides and open on the 4th. Some houses hang a woolen curtain across the open side to hold the warmth in. This house has one undyed, the color of old butter, pulled half back tonight on a peg. The box is the warmest place in the room. The wall behind it gives off a slow heat, borrowed from the hearth all day, and the close walls on the other sides hold the breath of the sleepers around them like cupped hands. A box like this is meant to be slept in by more than one body. The narrowness is the point. The shared warmth is the point. The mattress inside is not soft in the way the listener understands softness. It is straw, wheat straw mostly, mixed with the dried tops of summer herbs, wild thyme, bracken fern, a coarse sweet meadow grass that was cut in July when the river ran shallow and the children chased dragonflies along its banks. The herbs were not chosen for fragrance, though the fragrance is there, faint and grassy, when the body's weight presses down. They were chosen because they are dry, and because dry things do not rot, and because in a damp city by a damp river, anything that does not rot is a small victory. Once a year, in the late summer, the old mattress is emptied out into the yard for the goats to nose at, and the wooden box is scrubbed, and the new straw goes in. The bed is, in this small way, a thing that the warm half of the year quietly prepares for the cold half. The pillow at the head is a grain sack stuffed with more of the same straw, tied at one corner with a knot the listener would recognize as the same knot a fisherman uses today. The linen of the sack is rough and the color of weak tea, washed many times in the river and dried over the hearth, and it carries the slight smell of every night it has held ahead. There are two such sacks, side by side. There is no top sheet, and there is no bottom sheet, because the world has not yet thought of sheets. Over the straw, a folded blanket of undyed wool, woven on the loom that now sleeps in the corner. Over the blanket, the furs. There are 3 of them on this bed. The bottom one is sheepskin, local, from a flock that grazes the slopes outside the city walls. The middle one is the hide of a young red deer taken by a hunter the woman of the house is distantly related to, somewhere up the Derwent Valley. And on the very top, the largest and the warmest of the 3, the one that lies across all the sleepers and decides in the end whether the family wakes warm or wakes shivering, is Reindeer. There are no reindeer in England. There were not, even then. The reindeer fur on the top of this bed came from very far away. It came from the Sami people of the far north, the people whose lands lay above the tree line, beyond the last birch, where the night in winter goes on for weeks at a time, and the only light is the slow green of the aurora and the precise white of the snow. The Norse called these people the Finnar. It is not the same word as the modern country Finland. It was the Norse word for those who hunt and trap in the lands beyond ours. They herded reindeer when herding was possible, and they hunted reindeer when hunting was the work of the season, and they took from each animal the meat, the sinew, the bone, the antler, and the great winter coat of hollow guard hairs that traps warm air against the body better than any other fur known to the medieval world. That hollow hair coat is the secret. The hair of a reindeer is not solid. Each fiber is a little tube of air, and 1,000 of those tubes side by side make a blanket that the cold cannot find its way into. A Norse trader who handled one once would have remembered it for the rest of his life. The fur was warm in a way that no English wool, no English deerskin, no English thing at all could match. Around the year 890, in the court of Alfred, King of Wessex, a Norwegian chieftain named Othere arrived from the very north of his own country and was asked to tell what he knew of the lands beyond. A scribe wrote his words down in Old English. The account survives in the same manuscript that holds Alfred's translation of Orosius, and Otho said something very simple, almost in passing. The greater part of his wealth, he told the king, came from tribute paid by the Finnar, the people of the far north, in furs, in feathers, in walrus rope, in whalebone. The reindeer fur was the heart of it. From Otho's harbour the bales travelled south, by ship along the coasts, by cart across the country, hand to hand, season to season, until somewhere on the journey one of them came west, across the sea, to a market in this very city, and a man with calloused hands bought it, and his wife folded it once, and laid it on this bed. The hide on the bed had walked under stars no one in this room had ever seen. That is the only thing tonight that asks the listener to pause and notice. The fur on the family is a long road folded small. The rest is only the room. The first to come to the bed is the youngest child, who has been half asleep at the woman's knee for an hour already. She does not undress in any way the listener would recognize as undressing. She is wearing a long undershirt of soft, worn linen, the color of cream that has been left in the sun, and she has been wearing it since this morning, and she will sleep in it tonight, and she will rise in it in the dark before dawn. Over the undershirt during the day she had a woolen pinafore. The pinafore is now folded onto the wall peg beside the bed. Her shoes, small leather things, soft as gloves, are by the threshold. Her braid is loose. She climbs into the deep end of the box, against the wall, and pulls the fur over her shoulder, and her breath finds a slow rhythm almost before she has settled. Next, the older boy. He comes from the bench by the hearth where he had been making one last small mark on a piece of antler with the edge of his belt knife. He sets the knife on the peg beside his cloak. The same peg that holds his cloak holds the knife by a leather loop, and slips in beside his sister. He is in his undershirt too, and a pair of short wool brays, and he is asleep almost before his head is on the grain sack. There is a small space of fur between him and his sister, and the warmth of one will keep the warmth of the other through the night. The grandmother takes longer. She has been sitting by the hearth for the last small while, saying her quiet evening prayer that names neither God directly. When she rises, the joints of her knees speak. She lifts her own cloak from its peg, heavy wool, dyed once long ago in a faint madder rose that has now gone to brown, and folds it neatly and places it at the foot of the box in case the night turns colder. Her undershirt is grey with washing. Her hair is unbraided and falls over one shoulder almost to her waist. She lies down beside the older boy and does not turn for a long time. Her hand finds his hair in the dark and rests there as if she has done it for 50 years, which she has. The man of the house comes last, after he has checked the door, the smoke hole, the lamp. He banks the hearth one final time with the long iron rake. He pulls the white ash carefully over the brightest coals, half covering them, slowing the air. The fire will not die in the night. It will only rest the way the household is resting. He sets the soapstone lamp where its small light reaches the bed and no further. Then he lies down on the open side of the box, between his family and the door, the way men have lain at the open side of the box for as long as there have been boxes. The dog by the threshold lets out one slow breath through his nose. For a few moments no one is yet asleep. The reindeer fur is being arranged, pulled to the chin of the smallest, tucked gently under the bare foot of the boy, smoothed flat where it has rucked across the grandmother's shoulder. There is no embrace, there is no good night in any sense the listener might mean. There is only the small administrative kindness of making sure that the weight is on the people who need it. Cold has more soldiers than any king. The fur is the answer, the shared body heat is the answer, the closeness is the answer. This is not intimacy in any modern sense. It is the older, simpler arrangement that bodies survive the winter better when they lie close to other bodies, and that the people in this box tonight have known this in their bones for 1,000 winters already. The room at last is at its quietest setting. The hearth is one slow breath of dark orange under ash. The lamp is one slow yellow point. The smoke goes straight up through the wind eye into the stars. The dog's flank rises and falls. The cat in her basket by the wall has turned her tail across her own nose. The drinking horn hangs empty in its iron ring. The spindle lies on its side in the basket. The loom leans against the wall like a thing that has done its day's work and will do another tomorrow. The cloaks on their pegs hold the shape of the shoulders that wore them. The leather skates by the door wait for the river. The small carved cross and the small iron hammer hang side by side on their separate pegs, as they have done all the listener's quiet hour. The grandmother's hand has gone still in the boy's hair. The boy is breathing through his mouth. The youngest child has turned once toward the wall and has not turned again. The man of the house leans up on one elbow and watches them for a slow count, the way a man watches a fire before he goes to sleep. He looks once at the soapstone lamp. He cups his hand behind the small flame. He breathes a slow breath across it. The flame leans and falters and goes, and once the last lamp was breathed out, the house began to listen to itself. Step outside the door for a moment before going in. Stand on the threshold. The street is empty. The boardwalks of oak and wattle, lifted above the mud, hold a thin skin of frost. The 100 hearth columns that earlier in the evening rose pale and straight from the roofs of Jorvik have thinned now to almost nothing. Only the smell of peat smoke lingers, low and old in the cold. Step back inside. The door swings closed behind you. The latch settles. The room is dim and warm and very still. The fire at the center is no longer fire. It is a low red presence under a soft grey skin of ash. The banking is done. The watchful hands that raked the embers down and laid a thin coat over them have gone to bed. The hearth keeps itself now, a small heart beating slowly. Above the smoke hole, the wind eye, the vindaga, a pale circle in the dark thatch. Once in a while a single star drifts across it and out again, the way a fish moves slowly across the mouth of a pool. There is no wind tonight. The smoke that rises is so thin you cannot see it. You can only sense, somewhere above the rafters, the small upward pull of warm air going where warm air goes. The lamp on the shelf is out, breathed out. The wick has cooled. The soapstone bowl that held the fish oil is still slightly warm to the touch, the way a hand is warm after the hand has gone. The shelves around the wall hold their evening things. The drinking horn rests in its iron ring against the post, pointed end down, waiting. The wooden cups are stacked. The hand quern sits with its handle folded against its side. A small carved figure of Thor's hammer hangs on its peg. Beside it, on its own peg, a small wooden cross. The two of them not speaking. The two of them keeping each other company in the dim. There is no sound at all for a long moment. And then, somewhere in the timbers, the house gives a small cold creak. The way a wooden boat creaks at anchor. The way a tree creaks far back in a winter wood. The framing has been holding the warmth in for hours, and the cold outside has been working its slow way inward, and the wood between the two makes its small adjustment, and is quiet again. The house listens to itself. The cold deepens, not all at once, just a slow thinning of the air on the far side of the wattle. A slow tightening of the frost on the boardwalk outside, the kind of cold that has been gathering since dusk, and has finally, in this deep middle hour, found its full weight. The walls answer in their own small language, a creak from the high oak post by the door, a softer creak from a roof rafter where the thatch is heaviest, a tick from somewhere in the daub of the gable wall, where the clay and straw, packed in by hand last summer, are settling a hair further into themselves. None of these sounds are loud. None of them mean anything. They are the sound a building makes when it is doing the slow night work of being a building. The wattle is thin, willow rods woven in and out, and packed with daub no thicker than a man's hand. Sound passes through it, the way sound passes through a folded sheet of paper held against the ear, so that, from the house 2 doors down, comes a small far cough. A neighbor, awake for a moment, or only half awake. The cough comes once, then a pause, then once again smaller, then nothing. A bedstead creaks somewhere on that other side of 2 thin walls and 1 cold lane. Someone turns, someone settles. The breath of someone else's household reaches yours and is taken in, and is held a moment, and is let go. You do not know who it is. You will never know. In a city of perhaps 10,000 souls, packed close along the river, the houses are near enough that a cough at midnight from a stranger you have never met can sit in your ear for a moment, like the cough of someone in your own room. There is something old in this, something the modern world, with its thick walls and its closed windows, has mostly forgotten. The sound of other people sleeping, the sound of a city breathing on either side of you. The cough does not come again. The framing creaks once more, very softly, somewhere up under the smoke hole, and then again the long quiet. The cold has set itself. The house has accepted the cold. The two of them have made their peace for the night. The room continues, in the dark, to be the room. Near the door, on the worn place in the packed earth floor where he always lies, the dog opens his eyes. He is the small spitz, the Norse house dog, grey and cream-coloured, with the curled tail and the close ears of his kind. He has been asleep with his nose tucked under his hind leg, the way these dogs sleep. Something, nothing really, has made him lift his head. He listens, not toward the door, toward the rafters, toward the smoke hole, toward some small thing that has perhaps not even happened, a grain of thatch shifting, a wisp of cold air finding a new path down, an owl very far off, over the frozen river. He waits, his ears turned forward and then sideways. Nothing. After a long moment, he lowers his head again, settles his nose back beneath his leg, and is asleep before the second breath. The house dog's small wakefulness has lasted no longer than a candle's flicker. It has woken no one. In the basket by the wall, the grey cat does not move at all. She is curled into herself like a coiled rope. One ear twitches once, in a dream. That is all. Above the cat, on the shelves, the small evening things keep their places. The spindle whirl rests in a wooden bowl, with a half-finished length of grey wool still wound about its shaft. The drop has been put down for the night. The thread waits for tomorrow's hand. Beside the bowl, 3 or 4 loom weights of grey clay sit in a row, like small sleeping animals themselves. By the door, propped against the inside wall, the 2 pairs of bone ice skates lean together. Their leather thongs hang loose. The bone is dull in the dim, cold to the touch. If anyone were to touch them, which no one is. On its peg, the Thor's hammer. On its peg, the cross, both small, both still. The horn on its iron ring, pointed end down, empty, resting. The fur on the bed across the room, the dark reindeer fur from somewhere far to the north, rises and falls very slowly with the breath beneath it. 3 sleepers, maybe 4, hard to tell from here. Their shapes are one shape under the dark weight of the fur. The dog dreams, the cat dreams, the room holds them all. And the house, in its own slow way, holds the room. At the far end of the bed, the grandmother stirs, only a little. She does not get up. She does not light the lamp. She does not rise to mend or to pray, but her eyes have opened in the dark, and she is for a small while awake. This is not an accident. This is not insomnia in the way the modern world means insomnia. This is something older. In those long centuries before lamps lit every hour, people often slept twice. A first sleep that began not long after the lamp was breathed out. Then a wakeful hour, somewhere around the deep middle of the night. Then a second sleep that ran on until the rooster or until the first blue light at the smoke hole. The wakeful hour was not an enemy. It had its quiet uses. Some used it to mend a torn cuff by ember light. Some used it to whisper a prayer, half to one god and half to another. Some used it to talk low across the bed to a husband or a wife, the kind of talk that only happens when the children are deep asleep and the room is dark and there is no business of the day pressing in. Some used it for nothing at all. Some only lay in the dark and listened to the house and let their thoughts move at the speed the dark allowed. The dark was not, in those centuries, a thing to defeat. It was a thing to sit with. The grandmother is doing none of these things now. She is only awake. Her hands are warm under the fur. Her breathing is slow. She is thinking perhaps of her own grandmother, who was a child when the Norse first came to this city, and who taught her the prayer she still whispers at the door at sundown. She is thinking perhaps of nothing at all. The thought drifts and is gone, and another drifts in, and the room is dim, and the embers are red under their grey skin, and the wakeful hour does its slow work, and asks nothing of her. After a while, a long while, by the clock of the modern world, perhaps half of one of its hours, her eyes close again, her breath lengthens. She is gone back under, into the second sleep, the way a smooth stone goes under in still water. The room continues, undisturbed, around her. The dark, undisturbed, continues around the room. The hearth holds its low red heart under the ash. The smoke hole keeps its pale circle on the dark. The thatch above it is silver with frost on the outside, soft and dry on the inside, and the warm air still rises through it, very slowly, the way it has been rising all night. The wind-eye does its old work, and asks nothing in return. On its peg, the small Thor's hammer, on its peg, the small cross, both keeping the same quiet vigil, neither speaking, neither needing to. They were carved by different hands, in different years, perhaps even in different towns. They have ended up on the same wall. They will spend the rest of the night there. The horn on its iron ring, pointed end down, the way a drinking horn must rest, because it cannot stand, empty since the last cup of the evening, faintly sweet with old ale, in a way no one tonight can smell. The spindle in its bowl, the wool still wound about its shaft, the half-finished thread waiting. Tomorrow's hand will find it exactly where it was left. The clay loom weights beside it have not moved. They will not move. By the door, the bone skates lean together, their leather thongs loose, the bone dull. The frozen ouse waits for them, smooth and pale and patient, somewhere out beyond the boardwalks. The dog by the threshold sleeps with his nose under his leg. The cat in her basket sleeps coiled into herself. The goat in the byre behind the back wall lets out one long, slow breath, and is quiet, and lets out another. The sheep beside her sleeps standing, the way sheep sleep, on the bed, 3 sleepers, or maybe 4, under the dark weight of the reindeer fur from the far north, their shapes one shape, their breath one slow breath. The grandmother is under again. The wakeful hour has finished its work, and let her go. The house keeps them. The walls, packed with their daub of clay and straw, hold the warmth. The packed earth floor, swept and re-ashed at the close of evening, holds the sound. The oak posts, set into the ground a year or 3 years or perhaps 5 years ago, hold the roof. The thatch holds the cold off. The smoke hole holds the one small root between the inside and the deep winter sky, and the small fire, banked under its grey skin, holds the rest. There is no sound for a long time. The framing creaks once, somewhere up high, and is quiet. The dog in his sleep makes one small soft sound, and is quiet. The neighbor 2 doors down does not cough again, and somewhere in the small hours, the house slipped under again. Step outside the door for a moment before going in. Stand on the threshold. The street is quieter than it has ever been. The snow on the boardwalk is blue. The smoke holes along the lane are pale, one after another, threads of grey rising into a sky that is not yet sky. The river beyond the houses is still locked under its own ceiling of ice. The Ouse has not moved for weeks. It is not moving now. The hour is the one before dawn. It is the coldest hour of any night. The wind has dropped. The cold has not. The cold has done what cold does in the small hours. It has settled the way fine ash settles on a hearth, even and patient, finding every corner. The doorways glow faintly. The boards under your feet would creak if you put weight on them. You do not. You only stand. You look. You let the cold touch the edge of your face and remember itself there. Then, when you have seen enough of the lane and the smoke and the long blue dark, you turn back and lift the latch and step inside. The door closes behind you with a small wooden sound. Inside, the air is warmer by a single degree, and that single degree is the whole difference between this room and the world. The hearth has been banked for hours. The embers are sleeping under their grey blanket of ash. They have not gone out. They will not go out tonight. Banking ash is an old patience. You cover the embers, you trust them, you come back. They keep their heat the way a stone keeps the warmth of the sun long after the sun is gone. In the rafters above, the smoke hole is a darker shape against a dark ceiling, the wind eye, the hole that gave a word to every modern speaker who has ever looked through glass and called it by the same name without knowing. Tonight it does almost no work. The fire is too low for smoke. Only a thin breath rises and disappears. The cold star that was visible earlier has slipped behind the edge of the thatch. There is no star now. There is no light from above. There is only the soft pale of the embers, and the dim that is not yet a dim. The dog by the threshold lifts his head, just once, to mark that you have come in. He sets it down again. His paw moves an inch. He sleeps. The cat in her basket near the wall is a small dark curve. She has not moved in 2 hours. She has the gift, that one. She has the gift the rest of the room is half learning tonight. On the bed against the back wall, the family lies under one weight of fur. The reindeer fur from the far north, from the people the Norse called Finnar, the people whose own name is Sami, the people whose grandfathers and grandmothers in the cold pine country fed the herds that fed this house and many houses south of it. The fur rises and falls with the small breath of the smallest child. A hand has slipped out from under it. The hand is still. The dream behind the hand is gentle. Whoever's turn it is tonight, the fire watch wakes. It is one of them, not always the same one. Tonight it is the eldest of the household, by old habit. The eyes open in the dark before any of them know they have opened. The body lies a moment longer under the fur, feeling the cold pressing on the wattle outside, feeling the room. Then the body rises. The body moves without sound, because the body has done this 1,000 times. The feet find the packed earth floor. The floor is strewn with fresh ash from the evening, and the ash gives. The ash absorbs every footstep, the way it absorbs every smell, every small sound, every drop of damp. Ash is the floor's slow forgiveness of the day. The fire watch walks the few paces to the hearth. The poker, a thin iron rod with a hooked end, is leaning where it has leaned all night. The hand finds it without looking. The hand has known this poker for 40 winters. The hand pulls the cold grey ash gently aside, just to one corner, only enough, and there underneath, the embers are still alive, a soft orange, a slow orange, a colour that has been there since before the children were put to bed, and will still be there when the children are old. One small log is laid in, just one, not for warmth, the warmth is enough, but to be sure of morning. Relighting a fire from cold flint in this cold takes half a morning of patience. Keeping the embers is easier. A hearth is a thing you guard, the way a herder guards a calf, the way a mother guards a sleeping face. The log catches almost at once, a single quiet line of flame along its under edge, and then the ash is raked gently back over the corner, and the hearth is closed again for the rest of the night. The fire watch stands a moment, a long moment, looking at the dim red glow under the grey, the way the warmth comes up through the ash without flame, without sound, the way it has done in every room of every Norse house from Greenland to here, the way it will keep doing in this room until the sun comes back. Then the fire watch turns. The fire watch walks the few quiet paces back to the bed. The fur is lifted, the body slips back under it, the fur settles, the breath finds its rhythm again in less than a minute. The watch was less than 2 minutes long. The watch was enough. The room is the room again. Outside, somewhere on a neighbor's thatch, the first rooster is still asleep. He has not crowed yet. He is folded in on himself in his small dark place. The light he is waiting for has not begun. The light he is waiting for will begin, faintly, behind the eastern hills, in something like an hour, or a little less, or a little more, but not yet, not for a while. There is still time. There is more time than you think. The cat in her basket exhales, the way cats exhale when they are deeper than dreaming. The small dark curve of her shifts only a hair. The dog by the threshold dreams of something that runs, and his paw twitches twice, and then he is still again. The smallest child on the bed turns under the fur. The fur settles. The ouse beyond the houses does not move. The ouse is still locked. The bone ice skates by the door. The small worn pairs of them lean against the wall in the same shape they leaned in yesterday. Tomorrow children will tie them on again and skate the river for one more morning. But not yet, not for a while. The spindle whore rests in its basket in its corner, the little stone weight, the size of a small plum, the color of a winter sky, the same shape as 1,000 other whores in 1,000 other Norse houses tonight. It is not turning, it is sleeping too. Even tools sleep in this hour. The loom against the back wall, the warp-weighted loom with its row of clay weights, is the dark shape of a sleeping animal. The clay weights hang motionless. The threads do not move. There is no breath of wind inside this room to move them. The loom has been here all evening. The loom will be there in the morning. The loom is not in a hurry. The drinking horn on its war ring catches a single dull glint from the embers and then loses it. The horn has hung there since the evening voices died down, since the last of the ale was poured, since the last of the old verses came around again on their alliterative chain. It will hang there until tomorrow. It is in no hurry. Nothing in this room is in any hurry. The leather boots by the threshold sit empty, slumped a little to one side, the shape of their owner's foot still inside them in the way a glove keeps the shape of a hand. The hooded cloaks on the wall pegs hang heavy and dark, the amber bead on the cord around the smallest child's neck, a small honey-colored eye that came down a long road from the Baltic shore, rests against the child's collarbone and rises and falls with a small breath. Slowly, slowly, the small carved cross on the peg and the small iron hammer beside it do not move either. They have not moved since the prayer, the grandmother's whispered prayer that named neither directly, only the one who keeps the gate at night. The gate is still being kept. The gate is being kept, quietly, by something the room has trusted for a long time. A wattle wall ticks somewhere in the cold, the way wattle does when the night reaches its lowest point, and the timber framing shrinks by a hair against itself. It is a small sound. It is barely a sound. It is the sound a house makes when it is listening to itself. The fire under its ash gives one soft pop. Nothing else moves. The smoke hole above is a slightly less dark shape against the dark. The blue of the world outside has not yet thinned. The cold star is gone. There is no eastern grey behind the thatch yet. There is only the dim, the kind dim, the dim that has held this household, and the houses to either side of it, and the city behind them all, since the lamps were breathed out. The fire watch is asleep again, already, so quickly, as if the small task was a part of the sleep. The body breathes under the fur. The breath is slow. The breath is slow. The breath is slow. Somewhere, very far off, a single sound, a small one, a thin one, passes through the dark and leaves no trace. A door perhaps, a horse perhaps, a piece of ice perhaps. It is gone before the room can be sure. The room does not need to be sure. The room is letting go. Soon the first cock will crow. Somewhere on a neighbor's roof, not this house's, some other house, 2 doors down, 3 doors down. He will lift his head and he will give the small clear note that calls back the sun. And then the household here will stir, slowly one by one, the eldest first, then the others. They will rise to Dagmar, the morning meal, the small one, the warm one, the one that begins every Viking day. There will be barley. There will be a little of last night's broth. There will be soft voices, but not yet, not for an hour. The first crow has not come. It will come. It will come without you having to do anything. The cold is at its lowest. The cold is letting go too. In a little while, without anyone noticing, the cold will begin its slow climb back up toward the day. It does this every night. It has done it every night since there was a night. It is doing it now. The embers under the ash are slow orange. The smoke hole above is dark. The fur on the bed is warm. The dog by the threshold is asleep. The cat in her basket is asleep. The smallest child is asleep. The loom is asleep. The spindle is asleep. The horn is asleep. The river is asleep. The street outside is asleep. The city of Jorvik, all 10,000 of it, is asleep. The roof above is dark. The world below is dark. The room is warm. The fire is kept. The dawn is coming, but not yet. There is more time than you think. Lie still. Breathe slow. Let the fur hold you. Let the embers do their work. Let the hour pass. The morning will find this house without your help. The morning has always found this house. It will find it again. There is nothing to keep. There is nothing to carry. The hearth is guarded. The watch is done. The night is small now. The night is almost soft. The night is letting go, and the rest of the night is yours. And so the longhouse begins to soften back into the dark. The hearth at its center has done its work for the night. The ash holds the embers the way a hand holds a small warm coin, and the smoke that rose all evening through the wind-eye is only a thin grey breath now, almost not there at all. The rafters above are lost in their own quiet shadow. The wooden cup cores in the workshops next door rest on cold benches. The amber dust has settled on its small table. The silver dirham sleeps in its wooden box, and the dark river outside the door keeps moving slowly beneath its skin of ice. The city carries on without you. The neighbor cough, the far dog, the timber creak as the cold deepens. These go on in their old way, the way they have gone on for 1,000 winters before this one, and the way they will go on after. None of it requires you tonight. None of it ever did. The household will do what households have always done in the small hours, and you do not need to keep watch for them. They are inside their own time, and you are inside yours, and the two times have agreed for a moment to lie down beside one another, and so the longhouse lets go of you, and you let go of it, and slowly, quietly, the room around the bed begins to come back. Your own room, the shape of it returning at the edge of the dark, the small familiar furniture, the soft hum of a thing somewhere that you stopped hearing hours ago. The window in your wall, the vindogger, the wind-eye, held shut now against the night. Glass where once there was only thatch and one cold star, but the same word, the same shape cut into the same wall, doing the same quiet work it has done for 1,000 years, to let the smoke of the day out, to let one small light in. There is no need to remember any of this in the morning. The Borbay City, the cup-maker's street, the iron pot in the corner, the horn that cannot be set down, the spindle no bigger than a plum, the reindeer fur from the far north, the small charm on its peg, the cat asleep in her worn basket, they can stay where you found them, inside this one warm winter house, and you can leave them there. They are not yours to carry. They were only kept for you a little while the night was long. They will keep themselves now. The pillow is soft beneath the back of your head. The blanket is warm across the chest. The body has been still for some time now, and the breath has slowed without being asked. The hour is late, or it is early. At this depth it does not matter which. Somewhere, perhaps, there is a small fire still burning on a packed earth floor, and a hand has just laid in one more log, and a body has just folded itself back beneath a fur. The house on its own takes care of the rest. There is nothing left for you to do here. There is nothing left for you to do anywhere. That is enough. Close your eyes now. Let the breath slow. Let the shoulders go. Let the longhouse settle into the dark. Let the ember dim to nothing. Let the wind-eye go dark above you. There is nothing more to hold. Nothing pulls you forward. Nothing waits to be done. Rest now.